No,
I think it's me.
yeah, just push it away from you a little bit, and I can, hold on, I can adjust it. Okay, you're good.
Okay. I'll call to order the meeting of the Woodford County Board of Education, planning meeting via video teleconference. Everyone's here but Miss Richardson. She has texted me that she is still at work and hopefully will be able to join us later. Wow. Is that good, Rob? Okay. Next on our agenda is public comments regarding reentry.
Debbie, I have a quick question before the public comments. I had a question about the order of the agenda. I'd like to move the order. Is that something we could do later on? Could you let me know when I can get
Let's see. What do you want to move? Because I don't think there's like a specific thing for that.
I just wanted to see if we could move item 7F, determine whether to pause the high school project. I wanted to see if we could move it up in front of 7D. It just seems to make sense that if we're going to talk about pausing it, we would do that before we voted on anything.
Okay, let me just tell you right now, I'm going to see what happens with the financial report, but I'm planning to ask that we table all the high school things because there's more tonight till next week.
Okay.
So,
That's fine.
Bob, is anyone else here?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought my ears were going back. And then we'll switch it, okay?
Thank you.
Okay.
If you're going to do that, do we then want to modify public comment?
Yeah, I think because we have separated the public comment, so any public comment with high school, let's do that for next week too. Okay? All right, so that takes care of that. Anything else before we start? All right. Yes, sir.
Yes.
I've just been talking to her, so I said you all, they were. Piper McCowan is our new student rep. Welcome, Piper.
Thank you.
I told her we've had two. They're big shoes to fill, but I'm absolutely certain. I've been around her a little bit. I was at a meeting with her earlier in the year, and she's going to be outstanding. I know she is. So, you can work through Mr. Hawkins. You can also get our contact information if you have any anytime.
Yeah,
So welcome. And I want you to know that our student reps have given us some of the best insight, and so never, ever, ever refrain from jumping in or offering something if you have some insight, because we don't know what the kids go through. We just don't, and that's really that's where it's all happening, right? So welcome, Piper, and thank you again for doing this.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson, for making me remember my manners. All right, so, Lane.
As of right now, we're open until 6:10. Okay.
Should we, well, no, let's go ahead and do this. If something else comes in. Should we wait and go on to the instructional update in case another public comment comes in on this subject, since we did give it till 6:10?
I should, by the time I'm done with these three, I believe it will
Okay.
be right around 4:15.
Okay, go ahead then.
Okay. Cheryl Duncan. Okay, this one's from Cheryl Duncan. Good afternoon. My name is Cheryl Duncan, and I am writing in concern about Woodford County youth suicides and students' mental strain from the COVID-19 pandemic. I started the Ashley J. Dean Foundation in loving memory of my daughter who died by suicide on January 30th, 2012 at age 17. I needed to increase community awareness about teen suicide prevention and mental health, depression, and anxiety. I received the Woodford County Public Schools Hall of Fame class of 2019 for public service because I shared Ashley's story to talk more text less, and hold on, there's hope. Mental strain on the youth can cause depression, anxiety, hopelessness, increase in the use of alcohol or drugs, talk about feeling trapped or in unbearable pain, talks or writings about death, dying, or suicide. I would rather have a physical illness than a mental illness because people see your pain and you get help. I pray we are providing mental health wellness support groups, counselors for students, parents, school staff, and teachers, funds to provide the mental health well-being during this COVID-19 pandemic. We must provide resilient training for our youth to handle crises by pressing on and moving forward in their life. The mental pain people experience is real, and it is why they don't want to be in this world anymore. But hope heals, with assistance from our school budget to provide mental health services to our schools to operate these budgets. I want to thank you all so much for allowing me to make a statement about how we need to fund our youth mental health well-being programs. Blessings with love and peace, Cheryl Duncan. This one is from Melody Hamilton. Hello, my name is Melody Hamilton. I'm one of the health and PE teachers at the high school. I wanted to give you some data that I have seen over the last several years. At the beginning of health each semester, I teach about the components of wellness as well as the causes of death by age group. Throughout my years of teaching health, suicide has moved up to the second leading cause of death in the 10 to 14-year-old age group and in the 15 to 24 age group. This fact is so disturbing to me. These numbers are always 2 years behind of reporting. They do not include any of what is happening throughout 2019 and 2020. And I am terrified about what is happening and going to happen in mental health-wise to our students in the coming months and years. I ask you, as a board, central office, school staff, and every adult who is listening to this, to reach out to the beautiful young ladies and gentlemen in our community with words of encouragement. Not through text, not through an email. Write them a letter, go visit them. Tell them they are important because they are. Tell them they are our future because they are. Tell them you care about them now and you care about their future. Tell them they have a purpose. Get involved in their lives. I tell every class I've had these last several years, I do not know how they navigate their lives with social media in their face 24/7. I got to grow up without the entire world looking at me and judging me every second. I could go home and escape from the kids who were making fun of me. Students today go home and it gets worse for them because of constant online access. To our students listening to this, you have taught me so much. Thank you for being you. To our Woodford County board members, I ask you to focus your time, your effort, and your funding to overcome all the things that this pandemic has done to complicate school and life. Do not stray from this focus. The health and wellness of the students and staff depend on this focus. Don't focus on these complications as walls. Think of them as hurdles. To get over hurdles, a hurdler needs extra training before even making an attempt, and a helping hand and band-aids as they fall, if they fall. But if they are provided the resources and the training they need, they can fly above those hurdles. Our students and staff are looking at walls right now. Use all of your resources to turn those walls into hurdles and watch us work together to overcome. Thank you, Melody Hamilton. Amy Keller. I would like to address my concerns regarding the mental health of teenagers during the shutdown. I'm going to give 3 examples of struggling, voiceless teenage girls. The first one is a 13-year-old girl that I mentor. Her father is a single dad. He works 40 hours a week diligently to care for her needs. He does an excellent job, but this young girl sits home alone day after day. She is so eager to return to her school, her teachers, and her friends. She has voiced concerns to me about falling behind in her academics this spring. And in the upcoming weeks of being on her own. This is a stressor to her and makes her sad. The next example is my niece. Last spring, she had a classmate commit suicide. Last summer, she spent 10 days with me, and while under my care, she confessed to having nightmares of seeing herself in suicidal situations. With her parents' consent, I found immediate counseling for her, and it helped greatly. The counselor was one of our own Woodford Countyans. She kept in touch with my niece for weeks, even when she returned to her home and stayed away. I have little experience with mental health professionals. I was amazed at her skill, compassion, and the improvements in my niece. Today, my niece longs for school, sports, practices, friends, teachers, and coaches. I worry about her fragile mental health. She is not a student in the school system, but I know she represents many voiceless teens that are miserable. Lastly, a young teenage girl that resides on an isolated rural farm. She is being raised by 2 functioning alcoholics. She is subjected to verbal abuse, family chaos, and neglect. Her source of encouragement and hope are her teachers, her cheerleading coach, her drama team, and yes, her beloved middle school principal. That teenage girl is me. I dreaded summers. I rejoiced at the beginning of school. It was my normal life. It was my assurance that I was loved. I know that my unfortunate upbringing represents a population of students who are sadly voiceless. Please consider these students who try very hard to look happy, act like everything is okay, but are stinking emotionally, but are unsure of who to tell or embarrassed to confess a weakness or dysfunctional family life. It's exhausting trying to appear happy like everyone else. Consider the financial cuts that are on the table and how things like counseling, mentoring, and mental health evaluations may suffer. Amy Keller.
Thank you.
Whitney Fowles. I'm sorry. Yes, just one more.
Okay.
I hope that tonight you listen to the public comments. The governor's recommendation to delay in-person learning is just that, a recommendation. The Woodford County Health Department has been a leader in providing information for our community, keeping us informed of our local status. Many other communities in the state are not as lucky, relying solely on the data provided by the state's website, which is limited in reporting negative tests and negligent in following up on recovered cases. If every county's health department was as on top of it as Woodford County's, we might have a real understanding of the testing and results going on throughout all communities in the state of Kentucky. I urge you to follow local information from Woodford County when considering the start date for in-person school to begin, and to not rely on limited data being provided by other resources. Attached are several resources for review. Included in these references are that of the top 5 counties by total positive cases and are some of the most populated counties. That is Jefferson, Fayette, Warren, Kenton, and Boone, which account for 48% of all of Kentucky's cases. They also account for 49% of Kentucky's deaths. Kentucky's total death rate includes 63% from long-term care facilities and correctional institutes. That is statewide data compared that to our local data with 51 active cases, 0 hospitalizations, and 1 case of a school-aged child. Let that data speak to you. My comments at the last meeting still ring true as the reason why kids need to be back in school in person if chosen by their family. Let their numbers help support the decision as we move forward. Sincerely, Whitney Fowles.
Thank you, Elaine. All right. I do want to say something quickly about public comment. We had set some guidelines when we first, endeavored to find a way to continue to include public comment, even though we were meeting in person. We tried to mimic what a public comment, we all agreed we would try to mimic what someone coming to a meeting would be like. And so we set the guidelines at you've got to submit it between 5:30 and 6:15. I think that we've been including comments that came before that, and it's understandable for time and hard to say no, but when we do put out a guidance to the public of what the rules are, we have to follow them, because some people might send it in early and get okay, and some people go ahead and get an okay on it, and some people may not even try to send it in early because they are following the guidelines that we set at a board meeting and published. So if we want to change those, I don't want to get bogged down in that because we have a lot to do, I know, with reentry, but we need to be following the rules we put on the website and that we publicize. That's only fair to the public. You know, some do and some don't. So if we want to change that, we need some input on it, I think, before next week, because we're scheduled to have public comment again next week. If we want to,
Debbie, just as a point of order, is this something we can and should discuss tonight?
well, and Grant, we are on public comment.
Can we discuss our public comment policy after the public has commented, or does it need to be an agenda item, Mr. Chenoweth?
It's right here now.
I am. I'm getting a lot of feedback.
Okay. Well, we have a, can you hear me, understand me? Or,
I can.
okay. We have set kind of guidelines for submitting public comment while we're having virtual meetings. We've been trying to accommodate that, knowing that a lot of districts did not. We have set a time frame, and I think some comments have been coming through that were outside that time frame. So I was just discussing with the board that if we're going to do that, we need to follow what we publish online. That's only fair to the public. And so Sherry's point is this something that we can be talking about tonight because it's not really on the agenda? And I'm fine with that. I would just say that next week we have to comply with what's on. My position is we have to comply with what we agreed on before and what we've published until we change that. And maybe next week we can talk about changing it or sometime in the future. And I think she was concerned that we were going to start this, and I'm sure I don't want to talk for I don't want to talk for you, but I think you were concerned that we're going to start changing it now.
No, I have no concerns. I just wanted to know if it was something we could discuss because it's not on the agenda, or if it's something that could wait for discussion items. Just as a point of order, I wanted to clarify if we could go off the agenda and talk about that. I'm fine either way. I just want us to know the rule is you follow the agenda of the special meeting, or you can add things in.
The board chair, as presiding officer, making an admonition about following the rules is fine. If you're going to discuss a change to the rule, that needs to be an agenda item, but just admonishing people for the purposes of maintaining order and proceeding with the meeting is fine. It just doesn't need to become a discussion.
Okay, well, let's do that then. Let's say until we get it on agenda, maybe next week, if somebody wants to put it on there, that we follow the guidelines that we have set and publicized. That's what we'll say. And we can talk about expanding that when we get it on agenda in a future meeting. Okay? Thank you, Sherry. All right. Discussion items. Looks so innocent sitting there. Return to in-person. I'm sorry, Brian.
Yeah, if you don't want me to.
Ryan was like, dang, so close.
Good evening. I want to start first off with an equity update as far as where we're at with our equity work. Right now, now that we have teachers back in, all of our schools, some have already completed doing the first module of that cultural responsiveness training during these first few work days. Others, it's coming up in the very near future. What that first module focuses on is defining what equity is. That term is thrown around in many ways, shapes, and forms, but it really gets at defining that not only on the individual level, but for each school, what equity means. Also examining bias, a couple activities, part of that, and then ultimately just engaging in cultural awareness. So I'll go back to the assessment that we did and then the workshop with Dr. Banks. This is all stemming from that, and now our school teams made up primarily of your principal and a teacher lead of doing these modules. Next steps where we go from here with our equity work is to continue with that equity action plan, albeit it's going to need some modifications, just given circumstances. So once we are back in school, our district level team will begin meeting again on a regular basis. And first thing on our agenda, we'll be going back to that equity plan. We'll have to look at timeline in terms of how things were to be rolled out, and then just also the format on how certain things were to be completed. So that's where we're at with the equity. Any particular questions?
Yeah, I just have a really quick question. So
Sure.
just remind me, there's a committee, and then the board has some training. Is the board training component of this done, or is there going to be any more involvement with the board?
At this point, yes. That was just the initial baseline, and taking that assessment just, was a learning experience as well, as was the workshop. A lot of those things about defining equity were addressed, and there's a lot of self-reflection was the purpose of that. There is a post part of that, post-assessment, where after, we have not officially set that date, again, due to circumstances, to where we'll take that assessment again, and we have our baseline, and then see how much we've grown over the course of time.
Okay, just wondering what else we have to look forward to, and I'm going to put Ms. McCowan on the spot right away. I know she's interested in this issue. That's how I got to know her.
Very good.
So if you do have board input or anything, there's any way that she wants to, and we can incorporate her, that would be great.
This was something we kind of left off talking about. We were able, and I believe I mentioned it to you all, we were able to add 2 new parent members over the course of the summer, but we had just talked about increasing our representation, and one of which was students.
Okay.
We kind of got a 2-for-1 where we had the parent and her daughter both join the team,
Okay, good.
but we were looking for more student representation. So it's
Okay. That might be a way to be a board rep and
Yeah,
be
that'd
involved
be-
in that. That would be great, because then she could have her input with that.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
that would work out.
All right.
Does that fill the number of students you were hoping to get, or?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know that we established that. That would put us at 2 regular members. I think we also need to increase our diversity on there. As I mentioned, as a female, we'd like to have a male, but certainly a
Sure, and that's
minority
what
representation as well.
Sure.
I was gonna say that Ms. McCown might be able to reach out and find a couple other students who would share that interest and dedication. That
Yeah.
might be a.
I've got a lot of friends who I know would love to be a part of that, so.
So you can
We're
just work
20
with-
minutes into our first meeting and you've got a task already.
That's right. So you two, yeah, you guys can find a place where she'll be productive. I think that's great. Okay.
Anything else on equity? All right, instructionally. So Martha said this to me today and it seems like forever ago, it was 10 days ago-ish that we voted to go all virtual. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that seemed like forever ago, much like many things do. So I just kind of, since that time, going all virtual, what it did for us is we had to revisit our plans of what we had planned for virtual instruction under the dual entry model, the parent choice model. And what I mean by that is we had to scale up our planning. Originally, under parent choice, we're looking at 35% who are all virtual, and not only 35% of students, but their families. So in regard to the trainings that we wanted to offer, and even back to school events, we went from 35% to 100% are now all virtual. So since that time, that obviously requires more in-depth training and planning, specifically at our school levels. Now that our teachers are back, to help them prepare for virtual instruction. Again, we're talking about all teachers at this point. More supports for families that I mentioned, and what further complicates it is just the logistics that we have to coordinate for that. We can't just hold an open event night where everybody shows up in person. You have to do it by appointment, you have to do it in a small group, but a number of those things are planned and being planned. So the only reason they are still being planned is we're still assessing the need. There are different back-to-school events going on right now. I believe Beep and Greet is going on at the middle school, and one of the things, as an example, one of the things we've asked them to do is just assess the need. If people want more training in regard to technology, if people have needs in terms of getting internet access, so that we can literally put name to a face, put them on a list, and figure out how to provide that support. And then, again, what we've been doing is logistics, and more logistics. That's, no matter what model we're entering in, that takes a vast majority of our time. Anything from repairing and distributing devices to developing expectations what a virtual day is going to look like for students and families. So 10 days ago, that's where we started with. So right now, where we're at, as I've mentioned, we have the task force and our district administrative team who have kind of been setting the framework of what virtual learning looks like under that dual system model. And since then, now that we're all virtual, it's now gone more so to the school level, where rubber meets the road, so to speak. Again, with having our teachers in, having their input in terms of what worked in the spring, what didn't work, what resources to incorporate, so on and so forth. And so at the school level, their leadership teams are expanding upon that framework that we originally established in planning those specifics. In doing this, we understand that there are still questions. Okay, we had a choice, we had to do it, now we're all virtual, what does that mean? And so that's the reason for the visual that we put together, I should say that they put together with our input. Yes, if we could go to that yellow sheet, please. Because ultimately what we're trying to prepare for is, we had the choice model, which was very popular, but now we go all virtual. But we want to set ourselves up in a position that, should we be able to re-enter in the near future, like many in our community want to do, we want to show that transition and how that works. So those of you public who may be watching, this is posted on our website now. It's under August 17th board meeting as a flow chart. If any of you out there watching would like to look at this. But if we could look at the elementary, middle school side first. So that's exactly what it represents. You have the two boxes up top to represent the two choices. Now we're all funneling together there in the middle what it's going to look like on August 26th. Please understand this is just a general guide. It's not going to have all the details of what may be going on at Huntertown or at Woodford County Middle in terms of what virtual instruction looks like. That's what the schools are doing right now. So everybody comes back to virtual, and then eventually, our hope is that we can branch back out and offer a virtual and in-person option. So that's what's illustrated there on the elementary and middle school side. If you flip over to the high school side, that graphic's going to look a little bit different. Notice it doesn't merge in the middle, because the decision has been made that those two classifications will remain the same. If you chose for in-person, you move down a row there to what they titled, it's in-person online or online in-person. We have a lot of terms.
In-person online.
Thank you. You transition into that and then eventually into the school building with traditional in-person. Whereas opposed to the virtual academy side, stays virtual academy. In the middle block, dead center of the page, that tries to explain the rationale for that, although there's a lot more to it. Basically, it's the very specific. It has a lot to do with the number of course offerings at high school, how complicated that can get, and also the staff necessary to offer all of those. You couple that with the, I referenced this last time I was up here speaking, the credit accumulation that students have to get in order to graduate eventually. So that's the general rationale to keep those two models. So we're hopeful that this flow chart illustrates that, not only to you, but to our public, because I understand, we've heard the question, well, we chose in person, but we're virtual, but I chose virtual, what are we doing? And this is trying to illustrate that. Again, what I do want to emphasize is that the schools are now, I got a call from my fourth grader's teacher the other day to set up a meeting that we're going to have later this week as our back to school, and the specifics will be explained to us then about what my fourth grader's day will look like.
Okay, so not every elementary will be the same.
Elementary have been working together. Kudos to their principals and assistants and coaches. They have been meeting very often, and I've been a part of that. Martha's been a part of that to keep it very, very close. What would be different is maybe some of the resources. Huntertown may have this resource that they've used for reading, so that's what they're going to use for their synchronous instruction, whereas another school may not. But in terms of their general framework, the elementaries are going to be very close.
So site-based decision meetings have been happening throughout the summer to decide these things. Curriculum. Site-based is also in charge of how they use their building space, like they're going to try to separate, socially distance. So are they been involved in this? Since
Site-based
this is a
meetings-
school-based decision, and curriculum is under site-based and all that.
Site-based meetings have been happening, and they've reached out to me several times, principals, about what they need to do legally, what they need to do, such as staffing plans, school space plans. You know, those aren't as important right now, but
Now,
They-
but
they-
when
they-
social distancing
Right,
comes in,
right.
they may choose to use some spaces.
but yeah, those have been going on. I'm not aware of any issues that haven't been
Okay,
covered
I
with
just was
site-based.
curious, because it is, I do understand, I think we talked about before that some of this is site-based.
Right.
And I understand it's a school-based decision, it's not, you know, the board doesn't get involved in curriculum. But I did have a couple parents, especially with the high school one, I think something that the board does need to be sure of is that it's equitable. You know, like what you're getting if you're virtual is equitable to what you're getting if you're online in person, right? That's our new category, the OLIP. And, you know, so will people that are virtual in the high school, and maybe we need to hear from the principal, I'm not sure, but just to make sure it's equitable, because I do think that is a board level question. She felt like there was a lot more interaction with teachers under the online in person, whereas the virtual just gets an academic advisor. I don't know if that's a content teacher or what, but anyway, just looking at that letter, and she sent it to me, I do want to be aware of that, you know, I hope what we're providing and that we can be assured as we continue to develop and build this plane, that whether you stay home because you have a grandma or a sickness, you're not really getting less than.
Sure.
You know, that it's as much as possible equal to in person. We know being there with the teacher, but still having that contact and stuff like that. So I hope that's an overriding goal. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Sure. I mean, certainly we want it to. It is going to be different delivery, but we do want it equitable, of course. And on the virtual academy side, they will have access to content teachers, content specialists.
Okay,
But let me use
and again,
an advisor, the term you used, or a case.
Well, that was what was in the letter. So.
Will be like their point person, but should they need help in a math course, they will facilitate that support with a math teacher.
And any interaction in that model will have to come from the student to the school. It won't be the teacher going to the student. It will be, if the student feels like they need help, they'll be coming.
No, the designated teacher will be monitoring their progress through Edgenuity.
Okay.
I keep referencing what's called a dashboard, to where it shows that student's progress and literally would put up a red alert, so to speak, of that they're not progressing through this content. And then it's up to the teacher then to initiate, to get that support to the student.
Okay. And then just one more thing, and I did text with Mr. Hawkins a little bit today about this. I believe the first date that parents had to choose was July 24th. We've made changes since then. We've gotten new information, you know, and made changes accordingly. So I think parents also would want the opportunity, but I understand now that that is open to them.
I spoke with Mr. Howe about that. I think up until the schedules go out, I think parents would have an option to be able to contact the school.
And what is the estimated date of that?
Sometime this week.
Hopefully tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Hopefully.
Okay, and so will we be advertising that? Because I have heard from some parents who had asked prior and they were told they could not do it. So if this has changed, we need some time. They've already been told no, they may not ask again if they don't have notice that it's changed.
How does that affect, is my microphone on?
Yes.
How does that affect the staffing? I know earlier we discussed in a prior meeting that we had so many staff that were going to be virtual teachers and so many staff that were going to be the in-person teachers, and now I guess in-person online, if that's correct.
Well,
would that affect staffing at all?
It could potentially cause us to have to add staff and we actually have an agenda item this evening that is asking for some new staffing positions. So if there were to be several changes going from one to the other, it may create some staffing needs, because what we have to keep in mind through all of this is that, yes, we want to have our numbers where our teachers can support those students in the virtual academy. We ultimately have to have our numbers low enough in the in-person that we can manage that. And that is extremely important. And so that may lead to some additional staff if we were to have several changes.
Okay.
In addition to what we're already asking.
But we are saying that we're letting them change now. So
I think we need to address that at all age levels then.
I just like a one call or something that, I mean, like even a one call tonight
There's
that,
really no,
It's even,
yes,
So
sir.
you feel
it's
like
just let one at a
there's not
time.
any.
Okay.
I can't keep up with everybody talking.
I think elementary and middle, they all funnel into the virtual academy. So the high school, and again, it's very unique from a scheduling standpoint and from a staffing standpoint, and particularly when you start going out the number of electives that they offer. It is extremely complex. And I can tell you, if we had wanted, or if there had been a desire to try to converge those two, we probably would have had to have added, I would say, in the neighborhood of 10 teachers at the high school in order to be able to staff it appropriately. And when you're in August, and some of the positions that we would have tried to have hired, it wouldn't have been possible. So I certainly appreciate Mr. Howell, and he's here. He worked diligently with his leadership team to say, how do we offer the best two different programs simultaneously? And this was something that was discussed by his teacher leaders within the building, as well as his administrative team and his guidance counselors, to say, how do we make this work the best that we can make it work for all kids? And so they were very, very diligent in terms of what they went through in order to do this.
And welcome, Mr. Howell. I don't think you had an official welcome.
Thank you.
Danny, did you want to finish? If I interrupted you, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Chris. Or,
I just wanted to, you said at all levels, it wouldn't be necessary, and that's what we're trying to illustrate there, is because they're all, it doesn't matter. Even if Ms. Smith is virtual academy teacher, it's the same as Mr. Smith over here who is in person, because they're all planning what virtual instruction looks like the same.
okay, and I didn't know if, with Odyssey Ware being the kind of adopted, if the differentiation was there between the virtual academy or the in-person, so I didn't know if we needed to talk about it at each level.
No, like I said, it wouldn't apply to elementary and middle.
And I do have other questions that Mr. Wilson.
I was just trying to seek clarification from the chairperson and the superintendent. What is the answer to the question? If you signed up for virtual, can you transfer into traditional in-person?
Or vice versa. And
I think until the schedules go out, I think they certainly would work with families. I think the thing that we need to understand as well is that if you say, I want to go to the in-person model, and then we are able to return in person, at that point, you will transition back to the virtual academy.
if you don't come back.
If you don't come back into the school building.
That's true of everybody. That's true of anybody who signed up for in-person. If they don't come back, they're going virtual.
But it's very different at the high school than it is at the elementary and the middle. So I just think parents need to understand that if they signed up for virtual because they weren't comfortable with their student returning to in-person instruction, but they want to change to in-person, and when we can come back in person, if they choose not to, then they are going to switch back to the virtual academy at that point. And so they have to understand that that transition would occur if they don't want their child coming back in person. So
I understand, but it's my understanding several people are watching this tonight because it's an important meeting. When you say as long as you can change, as long as you do it before the schedule, that's really not clear. I mean, can you give a date? Can you tell them who to call, that type of thing?
Anyone need to call the school and ask for either Mr. Howe or Ms. Taylor?
By when? When's the deadline to do that?
You want to say Wednesday, Mr. Howe?
Sure, yes, sir.
Close the business Wednesday?
Let's say Wednesday at noon.
Okay, will you put that on the website?
And also, I think, put a one call out. Can we do a one call about that?
We can do that.
I think, you know, because not everybody's checking our websites. And if you could put like just a little, like what you texted me today, because we texted about this and what you just said, please understand, though, you know, just as straightforward as you just said.
We try to explain that, and that's,
well,
I think sometimes, and we will do our best to do that. Again, if there are a large number, please understand, I'll be coming back next Monday asking for more new positions, because we have to ensure that our in-person numbers can be maintained at a certain level.
And those positions will be based on our formula. We have this many people saying we're going to be in person, we're doing the formula.
Well, our goal is to try to keep numbers to where we can keep kids at least 3, hopefully 4 to 5 feet apart within a classroom. We can't do that if we have 28 or 29 kids in a normal classroom. We can't do that.
Okay.
Do you have numbers of where we're at right now with in-person class averages by school?
I mean, yes and no. Because at the elementary and the middle, because they are converging, they are looking them as a full student, but then they're also trying to make sure that the in-person doesn't exceed 23 or so. That's kind of their number that they're looking at. But one class may have 20, and one class may have 23. So there will be some variance. What they are trying to do is keep it under a maximum number where they could manage the in-person and still maintain some distancing in the classroom.
So at 23, the elementary schools and the middle school, that allows for 3 feet.
At least, yeah. And the elementaries may be 22, but again, that's closer to that.
That's really close
That's
to
very
that.
at the elementary.
Well, 5th grade and stuff is hard.
Now, and see, that's where you get into some of the
Right.
staffing issues, because high school cap's 31. So if you're trying to keep it down to 22, that automatically creates a need for some additional staffing.
Okay.
And so that's why I say if there's a number that would create that, I just want you to understand that would come with some additional staffing needs.
Okay.
So
I still just would like, because we have gotten new information and we've changed twice, really, from going from August 10th to August 26th, and then from going to where we're sit today, and we may make another change with the governor, that parents, as they reevaluate too, that should have another chance. So if we could put that out on a one call that they have it, and if you want to say, please understand, if you choose in person, when the time comes that you could come back to in person, you choose to keep your child at home, you will be switching to the virtual academy as described in this. I mean, and then they've had warning, and if they understand it, but at least we've told them, you know, so.
I just wanted, in terms of the numbers you have, the schools are keeping, because even today, I heard of a school getting newly registered students. So they're keeping tabs on those, and they know if this class went up 2 and this one went down 1, so they've got to keep them in balance.
I hadn't heard the 23 number before, so that's good to know. I wondered about, and I'm not sure if this is a question for this area, Ryan.
Sure.
But how are we doing with our hotspots as far as allocating those? How are we giving those out to students?
Do you mind in terms of Wi-Fi work?
Yeah, we're in the process of ordering quite a few for the elementary school levels. We already have quite a few for middle school and high school. And the schools have been asked here recently to get us a list of what they see as their need. I've received one list today from one of the elementary schools, probably going to get the others here in another day or two. And then when they come in, and see, that's the big issue right now. Anytime you order anything, especially in technology right now, we're looking sometimes at a month or 2 before things even come in. So I'm hoping that's not the case with these. I'm hoping they will come in the normal course of orders, which is like a week. But that is something that's out there that we have to be careful of.
And are we only allocating those based on free or reduced lunch, or is there any metric we're using to figure out?
There's been a few families I've worked with that are not on free and reduced lunch, but do have a need and have expressed that need to me clearly. We have put them on the list as well because there's a extraordinary circumstances type needs there. But we will see. I mean, once we get the list and see, and the other thing we got to do is we got to cross-reference the list with middle school and high school students, because if their family already has one at the middle school or high school, then we've got to set that same MiFi can operate multiple devices. So then we set up the family with one instead of having multiple, so that our resources go a little bit further.
I think the other thing too that's important to know is we certainly want to help anybody that we can.
Yeah.
Sure.
However, depending on where they are located, MiFi device may not work.
Yeah.
And so while we want to try to help in any way we can, that device in itself, because it's running through a network on AT&T.
Yep.
So
Has to have something to ping off.
there is
Yep.
a little bit of limitation, and so we're going to look at other options that we may be able to incorporate. It may not be at that person's house, but it may be in an area that we could take something out there, a bus, park it, something along those lines. But again, there will always be limitations when it comes to being able to get certain levels of access depending on where a family lives.
Yeah, I actually read something. I think Scott County has added a physical thing to the exteriors of their buildings that kind of broadcasts a wireless signal so that families can drive in, park at the high school, download their child's content for that day, and use their, I'm sure
They can do that here.
Yeah, they could do
We've
that.
got
Yeah.
very good access. If you get up close to a building, you
Yep.
can get what you need.
That's great. I think that'd be something.
Well, and I love the bus idea, and just
I do
any
too.
idea that really brings access when it's not a matter of free and reduced lunch. It really is just an equity issue. We want to make sure, and I think our district has always done a really, really fabulous job of trying to meet the needs, especially with the one-to-one devices and the Wi-Fi and the internet. But I love that bus idea because I hadn't really considered that sometimes the
That's
Wi-Fi might not work.
Yeah, that's something I think people picked up on. So I just want to go back and make sure. So we talked about whether parents can switch. Are you satisfied with that answer, Mr. Wilson? Are you
Oh,
sure?
yeah,
You're clear. It's very clear now. We're going to send one call.
Very clear.
The technical issues, we're just looking into them. Danny, was there anything else you had on that was not resolved or an answer given?
No, that's
Okay.
right. I appreciate that.
Mr. Hawkins, is there anything that you want to talk to us about, and I think we will need to discuss the governor's recommendation for reentry, or for open in person. Okay. Go ahead. Oh, go ahead. You finish your report, right?
Last time I got left over there.
Yeah.
Is there anything else for instructional or equity updates?
No, I think that's.
I have a follow-up question about the high school that I'll address it, Mr. Hawkins will talk about.
Well,
Thank
and
you,
I just had a quick comment. I just really am astounded by the level of staff that we have. For you guys to just constantly be picking up the balls and juggling them and coming up with things and working with site-based and working with the community and working with the health department and really just looking at best practices that are ever evolving day to day. I just think that the level of planning and expertise and just willingness of our staff to be able to kind of pull these together and get this done just shows what superior staff that we have and superior leadership too. So thank you.
And so these Odyssey Ware and Ingenuity are in place. Did we ever I think Mr. Wilson had talked about, and you may have mentioned it before, like kind of getting families used to it or what they're going to see.
Edgenuity we had already, so it is in place. Now, there are some updates and some new courses, which I believe we just got access to.
Yes.
Odyssey-ware, we are still setting up student and teacher accounts. What we're running into, but that's okay. That's okay. It's not going to be needed on first day. Quite honestly, what I've told teachers, I sent an email today, particularly to elementary folks, is focus on re-engaging and connecting with students first and foremost. And then you utilize the plans that you've been making, the resources you have first and foremost. We will get the Odyssey-ware to them. Now understand, Odyssey-ware is a standards-aligned course. So it's not as if an elementary kid, a fourth grader or a second grader, is just going to log in and just do Odyssey-ware of the course. That's not it. Let me back up. We don't have that yet. What we are running into with a number of our tech-type companies is they're slammed. And we're trying to get moved up. Mr. Hawkins was on the phone today with one of our reps saying we need this and we need this now.
Yeah.
So we did get some response today, and we're
Do we have an
working as fast
idea?
as we can with what we can control.
Yeah.
Odyssey-ware was set up today. Now, I'm working on the teacher accounts. Actually, I just got the spreadsheet for teacher accounts this evening. So that will go in place tomorrow, and we'll work on the student accounts tomorrow. So hopefully by Thursday, Friday this week, all teachers and students will be in Odyssey-ware and it'll be fully functional. It's fully functional now. It's just, we got to get the accounts in there.
So it's a matter of just kind of the technicality of getting accounts loaded.
Yeah.
But our teachers know about it, trained on it, and seen it. So it's basically just that nitty-gritty of getting people signed up.
Without their accounts, they have not done the nitty-gritty. They haven't been able to yet. And that's a hurdle. But again, I'm going to go back to the first thing I told them today is you re-engage and you build relationships starting out in a virtual world, because that's going to take a lot. And a number of ideas that they've come up with to do that first, and obviously incorporate academics in doing that. But we've got to do that first, get them re-engaged, and then we'll more so into the academic piece.
Yeah, and we
Is
did
there a
that.
And that, let me also say that's true of a regular school year.
Sure.
When they walk in the building, that's what we're focusing on first, and establishing expectations and loving on them.
Right,
and then we'll
Setting
get into
those
the
rules
curriculum.
over and over. There'll be different rules this year. But the Odyssey-ware, like as far as, is there going to be a training element?
There is, yes.
And when will that happen?
We got them all scheduled, I believe Monday.
Sunday, Tuesday.
Okay.
We're gonna
and
get
that's the normal time for training is a couple days.
We just
Yeah.
made this decision a couple days ago.
We have ordered this. It's been on order.
Okay.
It's been out of our control.
Yeah.
We have
I
pressed
understand.
and pressed and pressed.
Yep.
And we are getting it as quickly as we can, and we will train teachers.
Okay.
Again, our goal, as Ryan said, we want them to feel as comfortable as possible.
Okay.
Knowing that this is going to be very, very different. We're going to give people some grace, and we want to do the absolute best we can.
And I'm sure you are. I agree with Sherry. I'm sure you've had a hard day with Odyssey-ware on the phone too, Scott. And I'm just kind of like,
It's not about who's having a hard day.
No,
It's
I
just,
know.
There are so many things. There are so many things that are out of our control as it relates to preparing for a school year. This year more so than any other. And I think what we have learned is to be as flexible as we can be. And I'm confident our teachers will do that, and we will give them the grace that they need in order to feel comfortable on doing what is best for our kids.
And I guess my point, and I'm sure you made it with Odyssey-ware today too, is that I don't know how much we paid for this, but I'm sure the package included training. So we want to make sure we're getting everything that we contracted with them, and I'm sure you're doing that. It's, in our contract with them, we're getting what we paid for, not getting what we paid for, because it is causing a lot of stress for us, and it's understandable on their part. Everybody's living through a pandemic, but we just need to make sure that we're getting whatever contract terms we had. They're fulfilling.
That was my purpose in the email to all elementaries today, teachers and staff, was to try to take that stress down. You're not going to be expected to do Odyssey Wear on day 1, day 2, day 3, maybe even day 5 for that matter.
Okay.
Again, let's re-engage and reconnect and use the resources that you know and are familiar with that your school has planned.
And I was going to say that we got a list today that showed just a number of after-school events, and they all seem very exciting. And again, just kudos to our staff that they're thinking of all these ways to engage and to meet and greet and to get the devices and to do the training and to make sure everybody's comfortable with things. So really, I mean, it was a remarkable list. It looked very similar to a regular back-to-school kind of list. So it was nice to see.
Mr. Asher, do we have a list per school of percentages of in-person versus virtual?
Yes.
Could you send that to us?
I would say yes, but honestly, it is ever changing. Back to
Okay.
that I said, if we have a new registrant,
We'll just wait till school starts.
honestly, yes.
Because it's changing, but when school starts, you might be able to do it.
Because I would wait, because just, I think over the weekend, Captain Kurt sent us about how you have to mark that NIC. And so she has just done that for the students she knows of.
Perfect.
And then any new registrants or anybody we haven't heard from yet, we're not certain if they moved, that will need to be put in. So I think the cleanest list will be once we do start school, we have an infinite campus list to provide. Okay?
And we just set a new deadline to change, or a deadline, Wednesday, so until after that, at least, at the minimum, things will change. Okay.
I have just one more, and I would also say a huge thank you to you and to Dr. Jones and to everybody, all of our school administrators, counselors. I know that probably doing a schedule at the middle school or high school level is a nightmare right now. Trying to figure those things out is, I'm sure, no one's idea of a good time, so thank you for that. But just on a general question, do you have a thought on what percentage of instruction you hope will be based on Odyssey Wear versus what percentage will be teacher-based, or just going to kind of see how it goes with different grade levels?
I'm not confident to do that percentage when our teachers have not been in Odyssey Wear yet. I don't want to, I'm not confident to say
Okay,
that.
I didn't know if you had kind of a goal for what you wanted it to look like.
I really don't. For the way I see it is, to a varying degree, or to an increasing degree, when you go down, those students, we're talking about kindergartners, are going to need more live interaction with their teacher. As students are older, they're more independent. But again, I don't think I can match up a percentage of Odyssey on any of that scale right now.
Thank you so much for everything.
Sure, thank you, Ryan.
Is there a task force update for that part of it, or is that all we've done?
Really not.
Okay.
I've emailed out. We're on hold. We're on hold. Honestly, we were just at the point where we had a number of plans made, and now we're just implementing them at this point.
Okay.
That came out of the task
What
force
was on
in
the
those
list?
three
So
areas that I mentioned. So really, we haven't had the need to pull the group back together.
Okay.
Wheels are in motion now.
Thank
The kids
you.
are coming next week, so.
So you got this job in February, and the program you started in March. Is that correct? Okay. For you?
Yeah.
It's all downhill from after this year,
It was
right?
like 10 years ago, like almost 10 days.
You're almost ready for retirement, aren't you?
Sign me up.
All right. The next, now we're ready for return to in-person instruction. Mr. Hawkins, do you want to start this discussion on it?
Sure. Actually, I would just recommend that we follow the plan that we have in place. And that was to reevaluate things on September the 8th to see if we could potentially return on the 14th. There are going to be quite a number of school districts who are going to return. Actually, I think one started today. And others will be starting next week. So I think we'll have some data to see how things go for those school districts. It will give us a chance to look at our local numbers as well. And so I still think it would be a good thing to reevaluate on September the 8th to see if there's a possibility to return on 14th.
How does that coincide, Superintendent, with the governor's recommendation?
It does not follow explicitly the governor's recommendation. Why not? I guess because we're going to have quite a bit of information, seeing other school districts, several who are very similar to us, who start, and we will be able to see how things go their first 2.5 weeks of school. All the private schools are starting this week, so we will have data to see how things go from there. And then I think we can look, again, when we talked about looking at it September the 8th, that would be a month from when the decision was made. So we would have updated information on where we are locally. So
I'm just trying to paraphrase. We would not follow the governor's instructions because other schools did. And we would look at those other schools to see how they start. Are those two other reasons you
I don't believe I ever said that we would not follow the governor's recommendation because other schools didn't. No, I said we would have data. I said other schools are starting.
Right. Yeah.
And we would be able to look to see how their reentry went. And they would have been in school for approximately 2.5 weeks at that point. He's been very clear that he was going to show data after the first day if there are any cases or any outbreaks in those schools. So I think we will have quite a bit of information that would allow us to make a decision on September the 8th. I'm not saying that we will be able to return on September the 14th. But if those school districts have been successful and our numbers here locally are trending down, it seems to me that getting 3 weeks with our kids in person would be a good thing.
You said that we could review the data of the schools going back and see if they were successful. Define successful.
If there's not something where they would have had to have closed, I think we all know, no matter when we go back to school, there are going to be cases. Because the virus it's going to be here. It's here now. It'll be here September the 28th. It'll be here in October. It's not going away. So are they able to deal with the cases that they have? If they followed the right protocol, 1 or 2 students maybe were quarantined and they were able to manage that. They didn't have to close school. We're all going to face that. And so if they are able to manage that and keep things, I think, under control, where they can continue to be in school, I think we have an obligation to look at that.
One of the recommendations, I'm assuming, I've heard nothing about this from you about not following the governor's recommendations, as far as I've heard of that. But it's your recommendation not to follow the governor's recommendation and announce today that we will not be returning on September 28th.
My recommendation is that we follow the plan that we established on August 7th or 8th.
I'm not trying to wordsmith. The governor has made a recommendation not to go back to school on the 28th. What is your recommendation about his recommendation?
I think I've already been clear on what my recommendation is. I don't know what else you want me to say. If our numbers are trending down on September the 8th, and other school districts across the state have been successful in their return to in-person instruction, I think we have an obligation to our community, to that 65% of parents who want their kids back in school, to evaluate that and determine if we can get back into school on September the 14th. If we're not able to, then we're not able to. If we are, I think it would be good to have our kids back in our classrooms.
There's 100, like we've said many times, 100% of people want to be there, 100%. But did you acknowledge that if we go back the 14th, the 28th of October, there will be cases?
Oh, I think we all recognize there will be cases. I mean, it would be foolish to say there would be no cases when you bring students and teachers and staff members back into a building when there is still an active virus. And I think even if we go back on the 28th, to think that there would be no more COVID, I don't think that's a reality.
No matter what protocol, no matter what the amount of energy we put into it, there will be cases.
I think that is it.
Thank you.
I guess, I just have a question. I'm not sure, what would be the harm of reevaluating this on September 8th, like we've already planned to do? Would there be any harm in doing that?
Scott?
I've already answered that. I think.
Well, you don't think there's any harm at all? I mean, there's usually goods and bads on both things.
I don't see any downside to reevaluating on September the 8th as we have planned. Because again, I've talked to a couple of superintendents in the districts who have decided to go back. And I think their thought was, if we can get our kids back in with us, that's a win.
And we're not saying we will or won't, we're saying that's when we'll look at it. I think it is important to honor the two-choice model that we approved originally. And I also think that using local data really is key. I think when we honor the two-choice model, what we're doing is saying, parents, you know your students. Staff, you know your situation. Pick in-person or pick virtual. You have that opportunity. And so in allowing them to know their situation and make their choice, I think that's key. And then I also think it's key to use local data. We've heard over and over in public comment and from professionals that, local data really is the best kind of data to use when you're making your personal decision. And again, you can say, well, if there's one case that's too many, I want to do virtual forever. And you have that option. But if you say, well, there's one case and that's an acceptable risk to my family, and I want to go back and teach, or I want to go back and send my child to school, then I feel like it's important for you to have that choice also. So I guess I don't really see any downside in us sticking with our plan to reevaluate this on September 8th. I don't see any downside at all, because we could say, yes, let's go back and do the two choices, or we could say, no, we're not going to do that. So I think we should just leave it how it is. We've got a plan, let's stick to it, let's reevaluate on the 8th.
What are your thoughts on the governor's recommendation? Can I ask Ms.
Sure, of course.
What are your thoughts about the governor's recommendation of waiting until the 28th, give the mandatory masking policy a better chance to work, get numbers down, and then we go back on the 28th? What are your thoughts about the recommendation?
I think the governor's done a fine job, and he's in a real tough spot. But I do think that date was an arbitrary date. I don't know that he said that's because it's 3 weeks before your fall break in Woodford, or because it's 1 week before your fall break in Woodford. I don't know that locally anything about Woodford had anything to do with that day. But from what Mr. Hawkins just said, it sounds like if we keep our original plan, then we get the kids back before fall break for 3 weeks of in-person instruction. And so I think just locally, when you look at our calendar and our local cases and what's going on with us in Woodford County, it makes more sense for us as a local board to have that decision and to be able to make it. I feel like if the governor wanted to mandate this, he certainly could. He's made a recommendation at this point, and if it gets to the point where he feels like there needs to be a mandate or mandatory closures, then that's something probably he has the power to do. He's not chosen to do that. So in my mind, us reevaluating on 9/8 is not in any way not listening to his recommendation. That's us reevaluating our local data as a local school board and making the best decision for our local students, community, staff, And I think that's the power of having a local board, that's why it makes sense.
Mr. Hawkins, do we know anything about what our liability would be if we started when the governor had said not to until the 28th? Have we spoken with insurers or
We
anything?
have not, and again, that's still several weeks away. I have not reached out to our insurance company at that point in time.
I know that had been a concern that we had talked about in the past, was if we had any sort of indemnification against suit, especially, I think, with our staff, if we did start back in opposition of the governor's recommendation, I would want to know what our liability
Right,
was.
and I'll certainly follow up on that. You know, and I do think there is a very distinct difference between a recommendation and a mandate.
I agree. He has made a statewide recommendation, and I would want to know our liability on that and kind of standing against that recommendation. Has he or Dr. Stack or anyone given any indication on your superintendent's updates about if a school chooses to go that route?
I haven't been a part of any of those conversations that they've had with any of those local school districts. So
I didn't know if your webinars, if he had.
I mean, we've heard from Commissioner Brown that, you know, they are calling those school districts and talking with the superintendent and the board chair in many cases. But that's all I know.
Do you think it would be prudent to reach out to Commissioner Brown and tell him that you're advising the board to reevaluate on September 8th and possibly go back on September 14th? Do you think it would be prudent to give him a heads up on that?
I don't mind the call.
Okay.
Commissioner Brown?
Yeah, Grant's here. I don't know what he knows about the liability question. I think he's told us before that I'm not sure it's a negligence question. I don't know.
I may not speculate, just let Grant address it.
Yeah.
Greg, did you hear that question?
I did not hear what Debbie said.
I just didn't know, so have you been following the conversation? Have you been able to hear where we're at here? Mr. Hawkins is recommending we stick with our current plan that we just voted on, where we stay virtual till September 8th, and on that date reevaluate the possibility of going September 14th or maybe even some other date, but wait till September 8th to reevaluate instead of right away going to the governor's recommendation. If we don't follow the governor's recommendation, the question about liability came up. So I didn't know if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah. For classroom teachers, the liability issue will arise regardless of when you start as to how well they follow the rules that the district sets in place. Department rules, mask rules.
You went out, I'm sorry.
And my question was more of, are we exposing the district to increased liability if we don't follow the governor's recommendation? Hold on, Grant, you cut out.
Grant, your volume is low coming back to us.
It's all the way up.
There we go. They're asking about increased liability in coming back to school before September 28th. Your thoughts?
Yes, for teachers, it doesn't matter when you come back. For you as a district, it is all the matter of potentially for the administration and maybe for board members in their individual capacity. It's whether this discretionary decision is being made in good faith. And the good faith would depend on following public health recommendations, potentially at the state level. So it's not a pure test for that. Reentry applies, I haven't read your insurance policy, so I don't know whether the insurance covers you.
I think that maybe that's something we should do. So, but Grant, I'm sorry, you're coming in and out. So you think by not following the governor's recommendation, we may have more increased liability as board members? Do you mean personally?
It's very rare for board members to have individual liability. I don't like talking about this a whole lot with the public audience, but if I were a plaintiff's attorney, that's the direction I would go if my school started earlier than the recommendation from the state health officials, and then I contracted coronavirus. My school started early. That's the direction. Those are the people that I would sue, the ones that made the decision to ignore the recommendation.
And Grant, this is Sherry. My question is, if we start on September the 28th or September the 29th, is that liability still there and still the same?
If there's reasons for you at the local level to believe it's more dangerous for you to start than for others elsewhere in the state, it could still be a bad faith decision. But at the very least, if you wait until what the state recommendation is, you don't have to try to explain away in a lawsuit why the state recommendation was ignored.
And if the local recommendation is that we start back with that, how would that play into it? I understand there's a difference in recommendations the governor makes and actual laws or actual executive orders. And I do get that. And I don't want to place the district in any liability situation. I'm just not clear that the recommendation, one way or the other, to start or not to start, holds the same weight with regards to the law and liability as an executive order or, an emergency reg, something of that nature.
You can compare it to a team physician making a recommendation that a player not play, and it's not a law, and it's not a dictated decision, but if a team physician made a recommendation and the coach ignored it and the player was injured, the coach would have to explain how it was a good faith decision to ignore the team physician's recommendation. That's where the liability and the immunity question falls. And almost 100% of the time, that becomes a jury question. So the summary judgment and getting out of a lawsuit early goes away, and your insurance carrier decides how we want to handle this lawsuit.
So if we have a student in October that catches the coronavirus and they think they got it from school or they can prove that, we would still have the same liability.
Not necessarily. If the state public health officials have said they believe you can return to school in person safely, and you're following the rule, then at least return to school is in good faith because then it's consistent with the public health officials rather than inconsistent with what health officials have advised.
What happens if the national officials are contradictory and the local or the state and the local and the national are contradictory of each other?
That all plays into the good faith analysis. When you hear that particular agencies are being dictated by politics rather than science, it's probably a good idea to follow the science rather than the politics. But even sorting all of that out and deciding what you are listening to and what you're basing your decision on, you need to be able to testify as to how your decision was made in good faith.
Gotcha. So really it sounds like the bottom line is we just need to make a decision in good faith. And it sounds to me like basing it on science rather than politics is the way to go. Thank you.
The other thing was standing in opposition of a state mandate would increase
It's not a
our
mandate,
liability.
but even
It's not a
I'm sorry,
mandate.
not a mandate, I'm sorry, recommendation.
I think, it would be clearer if it were an executive order or a mandate, that would really kind of help us out, as far as decision. But again, I go back to, I don't know what harm it would do to stick with our plan and reevaluate this on September 8th, like we said it would.
Just so we can follow, who are these local districts going back next week, Mr. Hawkins?
Green County.
Green County started today.
Green,
Callaway's going back next week. Marshall, I believe, is going back next week. Bowling Green Independent is going back next week. Williamstown Independent is going back next week.
Private schools are back.
Private schools start this week. All the dioceses across the state have voted to go back.
You know of any local public schools going back?
More in our region, you mean?
Yeah.
I'm not aware of anyone at this point.
I guess the other, consideration when we look at all sides of this is, I know a lot of people want to come back early, so they may not want to get rid of that possibility by going ahead and saying that September 28th. But on the other hand, if we do say September 28th, we're not waiting until September 8th for yet another decision. So the pro of that is we've still got a chance to come back earlier. The con is we're still just going weeks by weeks and not having an answer. And I understood Grant a little differently, and I'm sorry we're having trouble with the audio, that not following the recommendation doesn't necessarily make you liable, but it just makes you have to explain more, and you're really the one proving yourself. It's just going to make it harder for you to explain why you didn't do that. That almost like the presumption is going to be that if you follow the recommendation of the health director or the governor, you have more of you start as being less liable, just by doing that. Is that correct, Grant? I mean, that's where it's going to fall on who proves what.
I think that's a good summary, what you just said, Debbie. It's a matter of how would you explain that your decision was made in good faith if you buck against a local or state or national recommendation, and if those are contradictory, how did you pick and choose?
Another reason of waiting until 28th is you've got all types of college students here coming back to UK, that 15 miles. This week you've got hundreds and hundreds of students coming to Midway College, Midway University to live, which is a quarter mile from Northside Elementary School. So there are some things that waiting until the 28th we can better evaluate. There's some situations that we can look at.
Have you had any conversations with Ms. Prater about this at our public health department? About the governor's recommendation and how she feels about it?
We have not discussed anything related to the plan that was, and I think she was very much in agreement that evening. And again, all I'm saying is I think it gives us an opportunity to evaluate information. The board can obviously choose to do, and I know it's on for discussion, probably have to vote next week, but the board can make that determination on whether you want to keep our current plan or if you want to just go ahead and say we're not going to start until the 28th of September.
Do you know on any of those schools that are starting early, are any of them doing like a rotational? I know we kind of got
A
away
couple
from
of them are, and then there are some, I think Hardin County is, I think
I'm sorry.
Green Independent is.
Are we talking about a hybrid when we say rotational?
I hate to say hybrid because
Every other day or 2 days a week, or
to keep their classes as small
but then there are some that have a model very similar to us, and and I haven't had this level of conversation with Cassie, but I mean I got to be honest. My thought, and this is purely my thought, I think you're better off with 17 or 18 students in a classroom all masked up than you are with 10 kids with no mask on, 6 feet apart. I think the mask gives you a level of protection that adds to, is greater than just being 6 or 7 feet apart in a classroom.
I And I guess I've always envisioned the additional 3 feet, you know, if we were able to be at 6 feet, they would have more frequent mask breaks. And I guess that is another question too, for our older kids, if we have to go above that 20, well, can they even have mask breaks, the older kids? How would they do that with class changes?
I think we can figure out mask breaks for students.
Okay, at the higher concentration.
I think we can do that.
Okay.
And, but again, I still think the mask, I mean, that's why they're being mandated. They're being mandated to be worn for a reason. And I think our students would actually be better off in a classroom, 17, 18, 19 kids being 4 or 5 feet apart in one of these than they would be with 10 kids in a room 7 feet apart with no mask.
Well, there would be nothing stopping the smaller groups of kids from wearing their masks.
Right.
For the majority of
But then again, you've got no guarantee that they would all wear them. And so, again, I think these are critically important. And that's why we follow those guidelines very, very closely in all of our meetings and what we do, because that, I think, is proven to be one of the keys in terms of the defense that we have to this virus.
Just for purposes of clarification, you said if to reevaluate on September 8th and if things get better. What do you mean by better?
I think Ms. Prather had talked about a downward trend in our numbers over a 2-week period. That was one of the things that she talked very clearly about when she was here.
And I thought we also talked about a specific number, like 4% of.
That came out from KDA. Their recommendation was 4%. But even if you look at some of the other models, the positivity rate is not necessarily the number. And we were on a call today with Dr. Stack, and it's very difficult to have a positivity rate at a local level that's accurate because of the testing and how if it's not all rapid, if some of them are 2 days before you get a result, it's very difficult to use that. What you're seeing other folks and other, actually I saw West Virginia's model today, it's the cases per 100,000, and I think I shared that with you all as well. And that's kind of a Harvard model that you're looking at by county in the number of cases that you have per 100,000, and that's a good marker. It appears that if you're around that 10 or less per 100,000, you know, you're in a better category. I think right now we're at about 13 here in Woodford County. But you know, again, if that trends down and we're at 8 cases per 100,000, you know, that's a much better place to be.
What about if with UK students coming back, if Fayette starts trending drastically up, would we incorporate that into our determination?
I think you can look at that. I mean, I don't know how much interaction our staff is going to have with UK students.
Well,
I don't know.
UK students in Lexington in general. I mean, those UK students aren't just confined to the campus; they're all over. And we have a lot of folks who work in Lexington, a lot of folks who work there. I was just trying to understand September 8th, what would we consider?
I think you've got to look. I mean, you can look at whatever we want to.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would echo, I attended the town hall, the commissioner had for board members last week, and they did say about the positivity rate, that it's much better to look at that, your downward trend in your county locally, and then also the cases per 100,000. So I feel like our local health department, Ms. Prather, seems to be very on top of the data and on top of you know, how to make these decisions, and just really, you know, seems to be very professional and really knowledgeable. So I absolutely trust that.
It might be helpful to ask her if she can come again. If we're going to vote on this next week, I think we should vote on it just to make sure. I would like to vote on it. So, it might be helpful, because we had talked about a metric, we talked about the Harvard or the, Dr. Stack said I think I understood you to say, was it you, that maybe your local positivity rate isn't that accurate, but then
Even the
really
state-
want to use local data, they seem a little contradictory.
Well, but you don't have to use the positivity rate. So what they said in the town hall was that there really is no local positivity rate. That's not how the data is kept and collected. That what you need to look at is the trend and then the cases per 100,000. So those two data points. And then also, obviously, every individual, has the ability to look at the risk and do an assessment for themselves, their health, their family, their situation, their student, what they're comfortable with. So those three things.
We do have local positivity rates, they're able to monitor.
And
But
that's-
what she did say was that it's better to look at that on a rolling timeframe, like what Mr. Hawkins had described.
Did you attend the town hall that the commissioner had last
Yeah.
week for student?
I watched
Yeah.
For board members?
But
Do you remember them saying that? It's recorded, so we could go back and look at it.
And
But what they said was
here in
good.
Woodford County, we do have a local positivity rate, and Ms. Crazer reported that to us, and Mr. Hawkins.
Right, we talked, my point is that at least what Dr. Stack shared today is that the local positivity rates are not nearly as accurate.
Sure.
And I think that has to be factored in. I'm not saying it's not a data point that you look at.
Right.
But again, I think you have to keep in mind that it may not be exact. They struggle with the state positivity rate because of some of the testing labs have struggled with getting some things in. And again, the one piece that you don't know, and I don't know how this factors in, is if we have local people who get tested in other locations.
And that was the
Well,
point.
I
of
did
the-
ask, I did ask her that. I asked Ms. Prater that, and she said that data is reported by your place of residence. So if somebody gets tested in Woodford County, but they live in Fayette, it's gonna go into Fayette's numbers.
Right, but all the negative numbers aren't coming in. All the tests that test negative aren't coming in. And if you watch the town hall, they're real clear about the issue with the data and the reliability of those positivity rates. So.
Okay.
So what would be on the agenda next week?
I,
To accept the governor's recommendation of going virtual?
or to accept Mr. Hawkins' recommendation of waiting till September 8th to again reevaluate. And again, and I think by setting that, and it'll get out in the public, and maybe we can say we'll get some feedback on that. I don't know. The one thing I hear from parents, and I'm so sympathetic to, because even though we may not be suffering, we're all suffering from a lack of ability to plan. So if we wait 2 weeks to say that we're going to wait 3 more weeks, to say, would it be better just to go ahead and follow his recommendation and set the date of September 28th? And I'm also wondering about our staff. I'm assuming because Mr. Hawkins is recommending this, that's fine with the staff. They'll obviously continue to plan to be virtual until September 28th because we may be virtual for Christmas. I mean, everybody's got to have a plan B. But I do wonder a little bit about that lack of planning, how parents would feel about that, and hopefully we would get some feedback over the week.
And to be clear, if we're going to have an agenda item to follow the governor's recommendation, his recommendation is to open after 9/28 and to cancel fall break. So that's part of the recommendation, as I understood it. So, if you're going to put 2 options on, I think that should be the option, the governor's recommendation, after 9/28, cancel fall break. And then the other option, Mr. Hawkins, was that we begin on 9/6.
It was just to keep
To
our
keep
current
our
Keep
plan.
with our current plan. Okay, so those would be the 2 options, I think.
So,
Just even,
go ahead.
one of the things I've heard several times tonight is that we need to accept parents' choice, to accept personal liability regarding their decisions. But it's not that easy because those parents, that student, are members of Woodford County. They meet other people. And we've got to think about, in totality, everything that's involved in this decision.
I agree. And I will say that I have received several emails, probably 3, I can think of, from people who say, in general, I don't have kids in school. I don't teach in school. I'm not related to anybody. I really have no contact with the schools. But when you open up the schools, you're endangering me too. Because, it really, opening the schools will be probably the biggest event here for us as far as exposure. I believe it's the biggest event in Louisville, and they've got a lot more going on outside of school than we do. So, yeah, you're right, Mr. Wilson, and that has been pointed out to me by several people who have absolutely no connection to the schools. That it is a broader question than just the school. But I do think fall break, if we want to just discuss that for a second, because if we go back September 28th, either way, we wait till the 8th, let's plan for the worst, hope for the best. We come to the 8th and we say we can't go in person till the 28th. Then we've got 1 week in school and then fall break. Is that how the calendar lines up if that happens?
That is correct.
And again, we may be able to, if we choose the option to wait, like this, which all of these options make sense. That's what we need to understand. They all have good and bad points. But I think we kind of decided that we can't give up fall break by our last vote. What do you think about going 1 week and then having fall break? Would that still, if we did choose the 28th, as not even wait till the 8th, just the hypothetical, if we did choose that, what would happen to fall break then?
I would take any time that we could get with our kids.
So, including fall break.
You said, what would it mean if we came back for 1 week before fall break?
Right, but you would still recommend that we keep fall break.
I didn't say that, Ms. Evelyn.
Okay.
I am recommending that we get any time in the middle with our kids.
Right, I'm not saying that.
I provided an option. It's not my recommendation one way or the other on fall break. I think that has to be your all's decision. That was part of the governor's recommendation. And so that has to be factored in as well.
But would I'm just thinking and I think we need to have every moment with our kids as well too, including if fall break is safe to come those days. But we didn't vote on that calendar and we didn't vote to change that. But I think it's something that we'll need to think about even as early as next week if we do decide to take the governor's recommendation over Mr. Hawk. Go ahead and take the governor's recommendation now.
Wouldn't be the first time I recommended.
Well, okay, and we all that's true.
But Debbie, I do think it's important that we're consistent and that if it's a liability to follow part of his recommendation, then it would be a liability we would need to follow all of it. So I think just to be very clear that what the recommendation is, the governor's correct, and that both of those components should be included.
And the governor's recommendation about fall break was no matter when it is, cancel it.
Even he said to look at your calendar and look at canceling fall break. I think that's what.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
I think he said that you would want to look at your calendar and cancel fall break. I believe that was part of his comments when we talked about returning on the 28th.
Okay, and then also, did I hear this, also put forth the idea that maybe when he does think it's okay to go back, that we go as a rotational hybrid situation? He didn't say anything about that?
I didn't hear anything.
All right. So we'll put on the
One
vote.
thing I do think, I think is important, and this has been a couple of conversations that Commissioner Brown has had with superintendents. And he said this is where it gets challenging, and I think this speaks to Grant's point, is school districts want to go back to school. They feel like they've got good plans. Their community is supportive of them going back to school. They are correct. And the governor is correct.
Sure.
So both groups are right.
Right.
And so that's when it gets difficult. And because you can make, I think, a valid argument on both sides.
Absolutely. And that has been probably the most frustrating thing about this. Everybody has, we worry about people getting sick, and that's so valid. And I also worry about going back too soon and then maybe ruining more of the year for in-person than if we just waited a little longer. We're seeing that a little bit in the economy, our opening places of business. Absolutely, I know everyone up here absolutely understands that kids get more from school than education, and that by keeping them away, there are some dire things that could happen. But on the other hand, maybe those are the same kids whose families would get the sickest, you know? So for every argument or position you have, there's another one. So we just have to weigh those for ourselves, and we'll vote on this next week. If we need to also vote on canceling fall break, I think we would make that a second vote.
Well, I think the governor's recommendation is one thing, so his recommendation contains those two components. So I think that, you know, that it's one recommendation from him, and so that would be my preference would be that we would vote on his recommendation. And then I guess the other one is just to, you know, leave things as we've already planned.
Okay, well, I'll keep that in mind, that you want it as one vote, one recommendation, and then we'll see if we can break it up. Okay, is there anything else about return to in-person instruction? Is there anything else that we need to know, or that has come up in questions that maybe everybody's gotten from people? I've gotten a lot of questions. I think it's going to be answered tonight that you can actually change your choice. And also maybe these curriculums and who's getting what is going to be hopefully clearer, because I think some people think we should say that.
So we ready to move on?
Yes. Okay, is there any public comment about anything other than the high school lab? I do not want people, I'm sure people will be upset that their public comment was not read on the high school tonight. I think it makes more sense to read it when it's actually an agenda item. They will be read when we revisit this. And in fact, if they want to pull the one they sent in for tonight and send in another one, there will be an opportunity to do that. So it might be better. So if you're upset, this just makes the most sense to me to not separate the public comment from when we're going to be discussing and voting on those items. All right, Mr. Hawkins, approved contract, Asbury University.
Yeah, we'll go through the regular agenda. We have an MOA with Asbury University to offer dual credit courses for our students, and it's a very same model that we utilize with others. So it's just another partner that we have now to be able to expand courses that we.
Madam Chairwoman, I move we approve the contract with Asbury University.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Those going to be virtual, do we know? Their classes, their dual credit classes?
No, I saw they're back.
They're back. Okay, I was just curious. Okay. Any questions, concerns about this specific agenda item? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion passes 4-0. Approved Title IX sexual harassment policies and procedures in one emergency reading for policy 1.5 as regulations went into effect August 14th.
We just received this information from KSBA. These are all based on new Title IX procedures, and so we have provided those. These are the changes that were submitted directly to us from KSBA.
Madam Chairwoman, I move that we approve item B.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Approved second reading of policy update number 43 and procedure update number 24.
We had our first reading at our July 27th meeting, so would be the second reading for our new policies.
Madam Chairwoman, I move that we approve item C, the second reading.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Wilson and a second by Ms. Springay. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Now we'll jump to item K, creation of positions.
Actually, there's one addition to what you have on your list. We're asking for 5 new teaching positions, 2 at the middle school, 3 at the high school, as well as 3 instructional assistant positions. These would all be at the elementary. And again, this is to be able to allow us to staff appropriately to keep our numbers in a manageable number. Where the IAs will come into play is if we are able to return in person, the virtual classroom might be a little overcrowded. And so this will provide some instructional assistant support to those virtual classrooms at the elementary level.
And if our numbers come in and we don't need those IAs, but we're going to have them under contract by then if we approve this tonight.
We will potentially move forward with them.
You just want approval and you're waiting to see.
What I will say is that we won't do anything before the first day of school on the IA positions because we're maneuvering things around to balance courses out now since everything's all virtual. But if we come back in person, those who have requested virtual will transition and they may have a different teacher at that point, but that virtual classroom might be a little overcapped. And so we want to make sure that we have enough support to be able to help the teacher and to help our students.
Okay.
So it's five teachers and 3 instructional assistants.
And then these 5 teachers, is that because of COVID or is that just our general, how we change our?
It is to be able to manage our numbers for the in-person. For example, there's only 1 art teacher at the high school. And if let's say she were an in-person, we have no art teacher then for the virtual.
Oh, right. Okay.
So 1 is an art teacher.
So when everyone's virtual, she could probably do it.
Because there's only 1 art teacher, so you've got multiple classes to be able to try to manage.
But when we're all in person, we have 1 teacher.
But you're still going to have kids virtual at that point too.
Oh, I know, but I mean when everybody's all virtual. Okay.
So this is to be able to allow them to manage those numbers.
Just one question. If we don't go back for a while, we still need the position?
Yes.
And are they within the formula or they're just a little different because of COVID? That was my question.
The formula really almost doesn't apply at this point.
Okay. That was all I wanted to know. It's because of the unique situation we're going outside the formula.
Is this, would this be a proper appropriation for CARES funds?
Potentially, I think we want to be careful about utilizing CARES funds, federal funds, because if you use federal funds to pay for these positions, the match on insurance and retirement is a lot more. And so I don't know that it would cost us more out of CARES funds to be able to do this.
Are these temporary positions?
They would be for this year, yes.
For this year. If it's a temporary position, do you offer benefits? I'm just asking.
Yes, if they are a full-time person, yes.
Okay.
So that would be 3 at the high school and 2 at the middle school?
Correct.
And then, is this something FEMA, we've talked on and off about FEMA, maybe?
We will double check to see what all are available reimbursement. I think the thing that we have to keep in mind is that every district across the country will be applying for FEMA reimbursement. I don't know how much money they even have. And it's not a full reimbursement from FEMA.
Right.
But we will certainly pursue it.
Okay.
So you need a motion to approve the creation of 3 new teaching positions at the high school, 2 at the middle school, and 3 instructional assistants to be used at the elementary level.
That is correct.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Wilson and a second by Ms. Fringate. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes 4-0. All right, review board agenda.
You got discussion items on that. Okay, we're gonna do
Oh,
the board
we
agenda
have
first.
a few things on the board agenda for next week. How that? Okay, that's our planning. Do we have a regular board agenda?
It's stapled on there.
Oh, okay. All right, sorry. All right, treasurer's report.
You have the treasury report, which shows the financial summary of the fund. I'll be happy to go through that with you. If you'd like for me to highlight anything in particular.
Yeah, just had a couple of questions about this. Does anyone else have any questions about this? I may just call you about some of this if other people don't have questions. I just want to make sure that I'm clear how things are moving between the building fund and the instructional fund. Because the building fund has a negative balance.
It will until we get the tax revenue.
Right. Did we, and then the.
That's not, I don't think that's a transfer. I think that was transfer for a bond payment. Because when you look at the,
Debt service.
down to debt service, that's the amount that was used for a bond payment.
Did we actually make a bond payment, or is that just being done? Because we have another bond payment in October.
Correct. We have not a bond payment, I believe it's 1st of August.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's just.
Or maybe in July. I'm sorry, it's in July.
So that was an actual
Correct.
payment.
Yes.
Fee for the high school.
I'm sorry.
So on the building fund, it's just.
It should be transferred to the building fund.
But not for the new high school,
Because
we have no debt
because
on
see, you
that.
see that exact same figure is showing as revenue in the debt service and then as a bond payment in debt service.
Yeah, so it should just be transferred to debt service.
Correct.
Right, instead of, because the building fund says it's transferred to fund the
Yes.
BG for the new high school, but that's not correct,
That is
because
not
we have no debt on that yet. Okay. All right, any further questions?
Yes, Madam Chairperson. Mr. Superintendent, if I'm reading this correctly, it's our revenue that we received in CARES money was $207,000. That was the total?
No, we received about 400, it was a little over 500,000, but by the time we distributed to private schools, which we were obligated to do, we had 483,000 approximately, and that shows that we have spent 207,000 at this point.
And you can send us a list of what we spent that $207,000.
Well, I can tell you all the PPE and related things that and I'll have to get it. We also ordered a great deal of cleaning supplies and things like that, that we have utilized those funds for.
What is gear supplemental?
We received about 83,000 that came through the governor's office. That can only be spent on 2 areas, either technology or food service. And so we've spent nearly 37,000 of that 83,000 up to this point.
Okay, so what's in the care funds? What's the balance that we have?
483 minus 207, so approximately 276,000.
Okay, and then how much do we have left in the gear supplemental?
83 minus 37, about 46.
So we've still got about $310,000 that we can apply for COVID-related expenses.
And the CARES money can be utilized through 2022.
Oh, great. So, like that technology that we use, are we using any of this for the Edgenuity and the?
No, it's mainly to purchase devices. We're going to use it for some of the Wi-Fi devices, those types of things. So.
Yeah.
Could we though? I mean, I'm not saying we should, but I'm just curious. Would it apply to these software packages, technology, or is that?
It could potentially.
I don't know what the definition of what you can use it for is.
And I think we probably have to look at that. I mean, I don't think we're going to have any trouble spending this money.
No.
So.
Okay.
I know that one of the things that they stressed was that it be for one-time expenses.
Right.
Nothing reoccurring, because it's not going to be reoccurring non-recurring, it's one-time money.
Right. But,
And
yeah,
we try to be mindful of that.
sure, okay.
How, and I think this is how have we done with getting in all of the PPE that you have ordered and making it, things like that? How is
We're still waiting on some masks right now.
I can't hear you. What did you say?
I asked how we were doing on the orders that we placed for PPE
Okay,
and cleaning
I
supplies.
just couldn't hear you.
They said that a lot of those were kind of staggered orders.
Right.
We are, right now, we are still waiting on, we ordered 25,000 masks. Those should be in this week. We've ordered the access masks, which are the ones that have the clear panel. And then we've ordered about 270 of those. And then we've also partnered with our jail. We bought the materials, and they are making 10,000 cloth masks for us. And those should be done fairly
That's a
soon.
win-win.
Yeah, I had a chance to talk to Ms. Rankin, and they were excited about the opportunity to work with the schools, and certainly we appreciate that.
It's probably a third of the cost of what masks would cost.
For that service. Okay.
That's right.
We are blessed with good community partners, that's for
Absolutely.
sure.
That's something we should, if we ever reinstate our volunteer.
Recognition.
Yeah, honestly, I'm not sure how volunteer, but, still, it's a service and it was a great service to our community. We should highlight those people at our jails who made them. So, anyway. All right, any other questions about the financial report?
All right, I'll go through the consent agenda. You'll see the donation request. We have some monetary for the Simmons DC trip, Hall of Fame, for the Larry Blackford Scholarship. And we also received a monetary donation from Purcell Baptist Church to buy some iPad devices for our kids.
That's very nice.
Fundraisers, schools are still planning ahead. Hopefully, we'll be able to have some of these. You'll see book fairs. Northside's even talking about maybe doing a virtual book fair this fall if they can't do the in-person one. The Southside School Pictures and the athletic department, their PDP, which is their typical fundraiser, utilize. Travel request, I don't think we have any.
Good,
Not-
surprise. Nobody has to quarantine.
Not sure why, but, and then the next item is non-resident contracts. These are actually all the ones for, the 21-22 school year.
Okay.
So
So we
we
kind of have our
always do
moratorium here, but
We
yeah.
always do those a year ahead.
Okay.
So those would be for all the districts that we typically have non-resident contracts. All right, on the regular agenda, you'll see the notification of personnel matters.
Mr. Hawkins, was the new COO on there?
I don't know if that was on there yet or not. I don't have the full list in front of me.
Could I ask a couple questions? Do we have any people applying for that position?
Where's Gary? How many total numbers do we have here?
It was in the 10 range. I think it's 10. Yeah, 10.
Was there a committee on that? To look at that or just?
So, committee hiring?
Always have a screening committee.
Yep.
That interviews candidates and then recommends finalists to me, and then I interview the finalists.
How many finalists you interviewed?
I'm sorry?
How many finalists?
3.
Do you want to tell us anything about the winner? Not the winner, but the chosen person?
We'll decide if he's a winner, yeah.
Well, I think I sent you an email about it, but Jeff Martello will be the new Chief Operating Officer. He is currently the Budget Finance Director for Deer Beach Springs Independent School District in Texas. Before that, he worked in Arkansas at the district level, but also worked at the state level with some districts who have been struggling. And so he has family here in the central Kentucky area.
Okay.
And so was interested in getting back up here, but I think he's just going to do a really, really good job. He's got good experience in school finance, but also his work when he was in Arkansas with the struggling districts. He touched in on those other operational areas too with school districts. So
Great, thank you.
So-
When's he plan on starting?
he should be here, we're hoping, in the middle of September.
And in the meantime, you've got a contract person?
We have a retired finance officer who has graciously volunteered to
Wonderful.
assist.
We need to recognize him on the volunteer.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Will he be available? I think in your email you said about getting us through the assessments, but will he be available for other questions?
I'm not gonna ask him to attend board meetings since he's volunteering.
Well, I know, but if there are
Not
other,
another volunteer.
no, but if there,
I will be well versed to be able to answer any questions.
and so you with him will provide us what we usually get from Amy, which is, or what we used to get from our CFO, which was, here's what a 4% will raise, this is
Yes.
what our seek is gonna be, and so
We
we're looking forward to seeing that soon.
are working on that.
Great, okay. Well, welcome to Mr. Martella.
Thank you for that information, Scott.
All right. Item B is the notification of payment of bills. Item C and D, we had to split those up due to an absence, but that would be to approve meeting minutes for item C and item D. Item E, we are going to be asking for a rate increase for ETC, and that is to go from, I think, 170 to 185 per month, and we will still be the lowest. It will still be the lowest cost of any of the districts around us, but because we are going to be limited to 10 per adult due to the daycare operation, we would not be able to stay in the black if we kept it at 170.
Is that 10 per adult because of space or because of just supervision?
That's because of the child care regulations.
Okay. What happens to ECT with all this virtual? I guess it's just closed down because nobody's going.
That's correct.
Okay.
All
Alright.
right. Item F is the middle school has a proposal to utilize the therapy dog, and I know Ms. Sayer is here. She has been working with Garrett, and she's the owner, and will be the person responsible for that therapy dog. We are following the same process that we did when Southside went through this last year. So she's here. I told her she didn't have to stay if she didn't want to, but she wanted to in case she had any questions. But she's been working very closely with Garrett through this, and again following the same process that we did in Southside.
Can you tell us a little bit about the dog?
You didn't bring the dog, you brought the dog.
Tell you about her. She is learning, so she would not have not worked at some point during the last 4 hours. So she is turning 4 next week. She is border collie mix. She was trained this spring after I got the go ahead from Mr. Bruno at the time. After once Sully got approved. So it was interesting going through puppy training during, she's not puppy anymore, but dog training. During COVID, we had some weeks where we had some setbacks and things, but she is certified and insured, and I have been working very closely with Mr. Wells. He will be so happy when I'm out of his hair. But I owe him a lot. I really appreciate his help, just getting to this process. But we did a survey for staff to see if they would be okay if I brought Hazel, her name's Hazel, and if I brought her in some during the summer, just to kind of get used to the building and, to know that she's at work at that time. And it's been going really well. She, of course, hasn't been around any of our students yet, but just, I take that back. She's been around Ava Brumley. That was because Ava was at work one day. And she's been getting to know some of the staff and just, what her habitat would be, there in my office and things like that. And I've been getting used to what it would be like if she were approved. And, she's been working on being very patient while I'm talking to people or, in the meeting, you know, that kind of stuff. Do you have any questions?
Puppies always have setbacks.
Well, she's about 4. I don't mean
Oh.
to imply that she is a puppy. I always call it puppy training, but
Gotcha.
she'll be 4 next week.
She'll be ready, won't she?
She'll be
Absolutely.
I would just say thank you, and I think it's a reoccurring theme that our staff go above and beyond, and you're just an example of that. When my mom was in hospice, the therapy dog would come in and see her, and it just will make you cry. It's so beautiful, and how helpful that is to people. Thank
And I
you.
think it will be especially helpful to utilize outside of the box resources, which even though therapy dog really is, there's growing research to support their effectiveness in eating and jogging especially, which we're seeing so much of. But with kids coming back, and even when students, you know, I've talked with Liz a little bit just on what are some ways that we could utilize Hazel, even virtually. So if I accompany them on house visits, you know, we can view the yard, you know, that kind of thing, just to kind of still give the kids something to look forward to or to ease their minds about coming back. And kids just open up so much more, or people in general just open up so much more when they're able to sit and put on an actual animal instead of something else.
I think any additional comfort we can offer, especially this year.
No, and I agree, the research on this is just, you know, maybe you can offer appointments for Hazel in the virtual time, like you have 2 to 2:30 with her or something.
Well, and that was one thing we did kind of, like I said, we surveyed staff to see what they would think, and there were a couple of concerns about distractions to academic learning. So I look forward to being able to get in front of my teachers and explain that our goal is to have to improve in class time, not take away from it, in ways that will do that. We also surveyed our poor parents. They've gotten so many surveys this summer and this spring, but I gave them one more, and I didn't have a great outcome. There weren't a whole lot of participants. We had about 970 students, and I had about 150 parents who answered the survey, and 95% of them were definitely in favor of it. And the 2 or 3 that weren't, who did leave their child's name, I've contacted them. And we've already kind of talked, and I've even offered to put them on a no contact list for the dog, and they said, no, don't put them on a no contact list. They just had some concerns about COVID, you know, and there are CDC guidelines for a therapy dog during COVID, and we've got all that. Mr. Wells and I have looked at all that.
Okay, great, thank you again.
Thank you.
Maybe we'll come by and see Hazel sometime.
We may need her at board meetings.
Yes, I was gonna say, I'm sorry you didn't bring her. We don't mind a little barking, obviously. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
All right, discuss this.
Then the last item, and we pulled this language from the board meeting last year, is for you all to approve which ad you want to go into the newspaper. We are in that 45-day window in terms of adopting tax rates. And so that started on August 11th. And so if the board makes a determination next week on which ad they would like put in the newspaper, we've got a couple of options. We can reach out to the Woodford Sun to make sure. I asked Bob if he'd take it. But we can either do it that same week as the first week of advertising, which would be the 27th of August, and then the next one would be on September the 3rd, and then we could have our hearing and vote on September the 10th. Or we could do it the following week. So in other words, if we vote next week, then we could advertise it on September the 3rd, the 10th, and the 17th, and vote on the 17th.
And when is our 45 days out?
45 days from August 11th.
Okay.
So,
but both of those clearly clear that.
yes.
And I remember last year we kind of gave a little stress to the sheriff.
Well, and he's asked for it by September the 14th.
Okay.
So the 17th is a little bit past that, but so
next week we'll vote on ours. We'll just have a consensus on if we
Vote on
want to
which
go
item.
ahead and just get it rolling, or we want, what the notice will say, and then the timing, and,
That is correct.
okay. All right, so that's that for the regular agenda, and then go back to the planning. We have several discussion items. Update on the financial consultant. Ms. Bradley, Ms. Springate, I think you all are working on that.
I had provided the name of the one person that I had spoken with that was interested in this Springate. I think was going to reach out to some other candidates from the recommendations from Mr. Chenoweth's office.
Yes, I got some contact information for folks. I think the main thing is we really need to have someone that has district level school finance experience. Does your person have that, Dan?
Yes, he did. I can look that
Maybe
up.
you could share that information with everybody, and then if I get anybody who's interested, you know, we can discuss that. I do think that, you know, we are having a new chief financial officer coming into the district, and so that's something to kind of consider if we want to expend dollars on having someone outside come in when we're having someone brand new coming in already. You know, if you want to send that information around.
I'm happy to send that out, yes.
Any other discussion on that? Okay, BG1 and related emails. Ms. Springate put this on, but then it was like an action item, and we deleted it. You still, it's an action. I think you were talking about the BG1 that was sent back from the KDE and the emails surrounding that.
Correct. I asked for this to be put on for discussion because I wanted to have the opportunity for us as a board to discuss and ask questions about kind of what happened there. So I guess my first question would be to Mr. Hawkins, if you could just kind of provide us some information about the email that you received after KDE sent back the BG1 to us.
I got an email from Jeffrey Colton with the Kentucky Department of Education asking that I give him a call. And so I called him, and he walked me through the kind of his review of the BG1. And he works in the facilities branch of KDE, but he's an accountant. So he's primarily looking at the financial piece to the BG1 and not from the architectural side, because they have architects up there too who will need plans and drawings and things like that. His purpose is really more on the finance side. And expressed concern that the 1 year restriction of the $350,000 left him where he did not feel like he could approve the BG1 because he did not feel like there was a sustainable funding source because of the 1 year restriction. So he told me he was going to send that back, and I asked him to please detail that in writing via email through their system. And so he did that, and I forwarded that on to the board once I received it.
And I will add that once I receive that, and this is going to be on the agenda to vote on another resolution on this. I think what I would like to just kind of remind everybody how this all evolved. We had a $600,000 resolution restricting funds a couple years ago, or a year and a half, whatever. It also was limited to 1 year. I think the intent of that was that it would be every year, but because the bond attorney for Baird came in and said it was best practices to do it for 1 year, that resolution was approved like that. When we kind of realized that just a few months ago, well, then the $350,000 additional one, let me go there, didn't have a 1 year restriction. So when we realized that the bond attorney was recommending 1 year restriction, we changed the $350,000 to a 1 year in accordance with what the bond attorney said was best practices. KDE didn't like that. So I told him, we're basically stuck between a bond attorney and a KDE reviewer, wanting two different things. So the new resolution was sent to everyone. I talked to Jeff about it, exactly what he needed. I think a lot of the language exactly what he needed, or the intent he wanted, was in the email from Mr. Hawkins. And then I sent that to the Baird attorney, and they've come up with a resolution that will be voted on when we bring up these high school things again. So, I did ask him why the BG1. Well, first of all, he made a few points, and I think it's important to keep these in mind. BG1s get sent back as incomplete all the time. A lot of times the numbers are wrong, the numbers are transposed. We've had those. And then you just complete them or correct them and send them back. This one is really coming to the attention of everybody because it takes board action to be completed. And again, he understands totally that we got this information from the attorney, but that's not good enough for them. So that's what happened after we got this. That's what I had those conversations with him. So it is really not an unusual thing. I think it's just somebody contacted me and asked me about it. When I explained the situation, they said it's just like when you get a mortgage and people are telling you to do this and telling you to do that. And that's not the same thing. So we will fulfill the requirements. We have voted on that BG1 and approved it by a majority of the board. That is not what is at issue here. We had approved the resolution. The very specific issue that will be coming on this agenda item is, are we going to revise the resolution again to satisfy Katie?
And I guess what I would say is, it's no small point to change a restriction for 1 year. We voted to do it for 1 year, for the 1920 school year, for $350,000. We all decided at that meeting not to take action and restrict another $350,000 for the 2021 year. We all decided at that meeting not to leave the resolution to be a 20-year resolution. So 1 year of $350,000, it put us into a deficit. Put us into deficit spending.
Okay.
So to me, that was a big deal. But it's a bigger deal if we're talking about doing this for 20 years, because that's over $7 million. So it's a really big deal to go from a $350,000 commitment on the BG1 to over around $7 million commitment on the BG1. So I think that's just the first point.
Okay. And then when we get ready to bring that resolution forward and vote on it, then that can be part of your discussion. For sure.
Correct. I'm just simply talking about the emails and the distinction and the difference. Okay. So when they sent that back, what they sent back was saying $350,000 for 1 year is not sufficient. We need a $7 million commitment from you from your general fund. So that's a big difference, and I think the public needs to know that.
Well, right. And I guess one step I did forget, maybe I didn't put in there, was that when we originally did the $350,000, it was ongoing. The only reason we changed it was because the bond attorney told us to. And now KDE has told us not to. So, and with the $600,000, it was always and he said, the CFO at the time said, no, it's absolutely ongoing. When he questioned her about that 1 year thing, this time they're just insisting that it.
I totally understand. I just want to make clear that it's a difference between $7 million and $350,000. That's a big difference.
Okay.
And then the other thing was that we had all attended the meeting on the July 7th forum and decided that all the financial decisions and everything about the new high school was going to kind of be placed on hold, and that the new board would decide those things in January. And part of the reason we decided that was because I thought that we had all agreed that our priority needs to be reentry. Our priority needs to be our students. And if anything, the comments tonight from the public really stressed and reiterated to me that the public is saying, please focus on reentry. Please focus on our students, our community. Please focus on these mental health issues, use your resources, use your time, use your energy to focus on that. I think that is what is important right now. And I hope that we're able to do that and to honor our word.
And with that sentiment, let's go to, well, the next one doesn't actually have to do with COVID. Impact Kentucky survey. This is something that was the TEL replacement. It's the new tell. All of our employees filled this out. We had hoped, I thought we were going to do it in June. We weren't able to do it. I have heard from a couple of staff, and I think it is important that we review it. We've always reviewed the tell data in a meeting, and it's always been part of our goals going forward. Or, not maybe official goals for Mr. Hawkins, but just benchmarks. And all the staff have, I think, pretty much filled it out. So, we can't just ignore that. They took the time to do it. So we need to review it, and I just need to know how we want to do that because it has been several months since it's come out.
I think Mr. Hawkins had asked for time, given the COVID restrictions, to be able to meet with each of the building principals in person.
And what we've done, and just so you know, is that we have had that initial meeting to review the district data. We modeled a process that our building principals would be able to utilize, and we've begun to narrow down we haven't gotten down to our final 2 to 3, but we've begun narrowing down some things that we want to try to look at for this year. We put that on hold, obviously, while we focus on our reentry. And really, I'm not going to ask our principals to try to do much with it until we can get back in person with staff, because the conversation really needs to be in person. It really needs to be one where you can sit down with groups at the table, you can analyze the data, you can really highlight and try to identify some specific areas, but that really needs to be done in person. And so we've modeled a process that I think our principals would utilize. It's just that we believe that number one, we need to get back in school, and number two, we need to get teachers back in the building so that those conversations can be had. Because a lot of it is really trying to get at from the staff, what did you mean when you responded to this? Because it was a 5-point answer. So you had like strongly agreed, strongly or agreed, and then you were kind of neutral, and then you had disagree and strongly disagree. But it was a 5-point system, okay? And the positive percentage only took the top 2. So the neutral didn't get factored in to anything on the positive side. And so some of those, you had a very high percentage that were kind of in the middle. And so it's really, that's where those conversations are so helpful with the staff, is to say, okay, I see that we had this percentage here. Is there something we could do differently that would move that? And that's much better in person.
And how does that work, given that these are all done anonymously, right? So then you just have a staff meeting and address it.
Do it in small groups. That's what we did. We put different principals in a group and had them go through and try to analyze. And some of you've got to ask questions. You've got to say, what would it take for us to move this from here to here? What needs to be different? And then really to try to target, because it's a pretty lengthy survey. There's 8 different categories. You can't address it all. So what are the top 2 or 3 things that would be most beneficial for our school that would have the greatest impact? And I think that's the direction that we're trying to go as a district, and we would ask that our schools do the same. But again, some of those conversations are necessary in order to better understand the data. Because it's hard to know, if you mark neutral, I don't know what that means.
And were there assessment points that were district level that we could evaluate that weren't independent school?
The district was the average of all the schools.
Okay.
It's my understanding of how the district data was calculated.
I think that...
Isn't that correct, Martha and Brian?
Yes.
The district was the average of the...
Yes. Yeah.
So did district employees fill this out, or just building employees? Okay.
We had no.
Right, so, I just know a TEL survey, we've always had the results presented. I understand that you don't understand, you think it's the way this was, the metrics on it were different. We haven't really waited to figure out the plan to address it before we've had it presented to the board. But are you saying you want to have all these meetings and then bring the data to us with whatever definitions of neutral or whatever comes out of the meetings?
If you want us to share the data with you, we can go through it.
I think you've shared it. We just
Yeah,
haven't.
you've seen it. Yeah, I mean.
But usually it's like presented and we're able to ask questions. I mean, that's just been the tradition with TEL for sure. And again, I know, this is one of the biggest data that we all get, you and everybody, as to kind of what our teachers are feeling. I mean, it sounds like if we wait for all that, we probably won't get this till after the first of the year. First, we wouldn't have any kind of presentation on the data.
If you want us to present on the data that we have as a district, we can certainly do
No, but I mean, if we wait for the meetings to kind of better understand what neutral means.
I just think it's beneficial for the schools to have that conversation before, when they've had TEL survey. They've been able to have meetings with their staffs before the end of the school year to really go through the data. The survey was done in March. We didn't get the data until June.
So you have not given us presentations on TEL until after these meetings in the past?
I didn't. If we've done TEL survey reports, it's typically been after the time when the schools had it and they actually had a chance to review it before we talked about it.
Pardon, Martha?
The turnaround with TEL usually happened before the school year got out. With Impact, it was delayed several months for whatever reason.
Yeah, we didn't get it till the 1st of June. But we'll do whatever you would like.
I would say this could be added to our data session, but I don't know that we know when we're going to have a data session given all the uncertainties that we're facing right now.
When are we getting a test score? Is that what you've been, I mean, is there going to be such a thing this year? No, you didn't take a test. We'll have ACT, kids were still taking that, but.
We haven't done the makeup test for ACT yet. I just got an email today about the makeup test. It was scheduled for 2 weeks, but due to us re-entering virtually, they're giving us 3 options we have to decide on. I got that email at 5 o'clock today. So we still don't have students who have tested from the screen test.
I just don't want the impact survey to fall off the radar, because the staff does take it.
Here's
they
the
spend their
thing,
time.
I can assure you that our schools will meet with their staffs to go through the information. I can assure you of that. And just as we've already gone through it with our building principals, as a district, we modeled the process by which they can utilize the data too. Again, our belief is that it's best done in person when you can have those conversations with your staff.
I guess, could you share the plan that you have developed with the principals with us? You said that you've modeled a plan.
We modeled the system. In other words, what we did is that we looked at we assigned groups of principals, different parts of the 8 pieces.
Okay.
And we had them then go through as groups and identify ones that they felt like would be the biggest, have the greatest impact if we address those. And then, so we narrowed it down to a bigger number that we need to get down to a smaller number. So that we've done step 1 of the process.
And every group had representation from each level. So we had 4 groups. Each group was addressed 2 of the 8 components. And each group had a secondary, a high school, middle school, and an elementary principal in the group to discuss.
As you I think that we probably need to table this until we get our
Right, and it was a discussion item. I just don't want it to fall off the radar.
No, I understand that.
All right, procurement of products related to COVID-19. I think Mr. Wilson had asked for a list, kind of an itemized list of what we've spent those monies on.
I don't think it was Mr. Wilson that asked for it.
Oh.
I asked for it originally.
Miss Bradley asked for it. I'll ask for it.
I think it's
we all ask
important,
for
but I
it.
just, for purposes of
Yeah,
clarification.
Okay.
Yeah, I can get you all the PPE, and then I know a big chunk of it too is on the additional cleaning materials and things like that. But yeah, I will. It may take me a little bit to get it. I can get you a portion of it very, very quickly.
And then, as far as the procurement of these products, can you just remind me what our procurement rules are? If something goes over a certain amount,
30,000.
30,000, the board has to.
Then we can either have to bid that, or you can do a state contract. And there's another process that allows you to purchase items very similar to a state contract if it's going to exceed 30,000. But really, up until the time that she took her vacation, Amy was in charge of doing all those purchases and following those guidelines that we have.
And is there an amount that has to be approved by the board?
No.
So we'll look forward to that list when you can get it together.
Mr. Hawkins, do you mind, I know you haven't expended any money, but you talked once about the cleaning service that you might get. Is that something you can include on there? Do you have estimates for that?
We have met with different companies, and Mr. Chenoweth, because of the potential cost on this, has advised us to do that bidding.
Okay.
And so we've gotten estimates, but we're going to go through the formal process. And Mr. Wells has been working on that.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I had one quick question. So these thermometers, we didn't have them out here today.
Yep.
There's one.
Oh, well, I had to do that. Well, maybe I didn't see it. So I guess I thought they were going to be walk-through thermometers, but this is what we're going to have for kids coming in. So they'll have to walk up and line their face. Do we have any idea how long that's going to take?
Based on our work we do it every morning at the office. It takes about 2 seconds.
We did it with all of our
3
teachers
seconds.
last week too at teacher training. You just walk up and it turns green or red.
And we're going to have one set up out here, probably.
Maybe 2.
Yeah. And then kids will be standing 6 feet apart until they know whether or not they have a temperature.
But they'll be in masks, so we're going to have them as distant as we can have them and be in the building, or as close to the building as we can get.
Okay. Property assessments and distilled spirits. Mr. Wilson, we talked a little bit about this.
Yeah, this is something we do every August. And Ms. Smith always did a very good job of explaining how the property assessments translate to increase, decrease revenues, whatever. She always did a nice job about the distilled spirits, 600,000, which is 200 less, or whatever. And I was just curious, will you be preparing that for us for next meeting?
I can actually share with you some preliminary data. I don't have it on a formal presentation.
Well, was that what you were going to give us next week?
I'll have more.
Okay,
detail.
well, go ahead and answer those questions.
Our assessments did increase by just a little under 5% this year. I think it was about 4.88%. If the 4% rate is taken, that would generate, and again, this is preliminary working with our volunteer, about $780,000. With the assessment increase, though, that means our seek will be reduced, and we anticipate that will be about $300,000. That does not take into any account any reduction in seek that we may see throughout the course of the year. And I think actually in our May budget, we had projected about a 4% reduction in seek. So if you look at it just in those two things, with the 4% revenue, we would generate, and this was with a 98% collection rate.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I don't know if it'll be that high again this year or not.
Mm-hmm.
We would generate about 780, loss of about 300 in seek, so that would generate about $480,000 of new revenue.
For the general fund.
For the general fund. If we get a 4% reduction, as what we budgeted we would probably see an increase of somewhere between 100 and 150,000.
After that's taken off. So just the net positive would be 150.
Somewhere in the 150. Distilled spirits, if their estimates are on track, and again, that's the thing about distilled spirits, it's all an estimate right now. We don't get those numbers.
Historically fairly accurate. Sometimes even we get more than that.
And again, what we don't know this year is how the pandemic may have impacted that, because for a period of time, many of the distilleries were making hand sanitizer. I also don't know if the one fire that happened last year is going to, I don't know.
When we last talked to KDD, they did not anticipate that having an effect, but.
And again, I don't know.
Yeah.
So if we were to take the 4% tax rate, we could see an additional $123,000 this year in distilled spirits over what we made last year.
Okay. But you're going to kind of have this more finalized hopefully next week, you, Mr. Is that right? When we look at this and talk about our notice and all that. Okay.
Tell me again the percentage on that. What the payment of distilled spirits income is based on the revenue that.
Now I'm saying 123,000 over what we've received this year. So we've received nearly $1 million.
Yeah.
So we're projecting based on their estimate on the distilled spirits of 1.12 million.
In tax.
What?
Revenue.
That's revenue.
Revenue. Right. Okay.
Ms. Eden, I didn't have this on discussion, but Superintendent Hawkins, do you have any results from the classified survey? We're going to survey bus drivers.
How many need to be virtual?
Yeah, how many couldn't come back?
Mr. Wells, do you?
I don't have a number for you. I know we've been working, with those individuals to come up with a plan that's going to work for them and they can work remotely.
But you were going to do a survey. You don't know how many.
We did do a survey. I don't know the number that responded to that.
Because it was 26 teachers, right?
27 teachers.
27 teachers, but we don't know about.
But it was a little different email that the certified staff got. We were assigning staff to the virtual academy versus the in-person. So I did follow up with classified staff and sent them something. If they had an issue, if they had a concern that prevented them from returning, to work with me on coming up with a plan for them to be able to tell them.
So you're doing individual case-by-case basis then?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, because our classified staff, the range of jobs of our classified staff is much more vast than our certified staff. So I do need to work with them individually. For some, it's a little easier to figure out what they can do. For some, it's a little more complicated, a little more complex to figure out what they can do, but continue to work.
You'll let us know though when you find out how many that was. You have to
So you want a number?
Well, I mean, you don't have to give it to me right now.
Right, but that's.
Yeah, someone like you did with the teachers.
Sure.
What percentage or numbers?
And then my last question, on the high school curriculum, on the two curriculum deliveries, online, virtual academy, and in class, that was devised by the elected high school site-based council.
That was determined by their staff. He worked with their teacher leadership group, so all the department chairs.
But it wasn't the site-based council?
I don't know if the council approved the schedule, the 4x4 schedule. But I don't know that they took action on the two different models. Because that was developed by the school.
That's not our responsibility. I understand that, but it is.
It is a school responsibility. I don't know that that is a council responsibility, but I do think it is a school responsibility.
I was told it was a council responsibility.
I thought curriculum and use of space, but Danny, you've been on there.
I would have said that's a site-based decision, but I surely wouldn't say it was given a pandemic.
Okay.
I know know so many things.
Curriculum
have
is
changed.
a site-based decision generally, and so is use of the space and all those kinds of stuff.
Could you check on that?
Yeah, see if the site-based met on those.
And then I had one follow-up question for Mr. Wells. Mr. Wells, with the classified staff, would they, I know virtual work is a little difficult and different, but would they keep their same work schedule? They wouldn't be given like different hours, like night hours if their normal schedules like 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. or anything like that, would they?
Well, we have not done that. An adjusted time, an adjusted schedule is an option, but that's not something we've done with any current employees. So someone could potentially come in when no one's in the building, but that's not anything that we've done.
Thank you.
Great. Are there any other items?
I wanted to just say a big thank you to our family resource officers. I know they have been working diligently, and they always do, and I'm very appreciative of all their help, and to all of our teachers, staff, again, thank you so much for all of your dedication to the students of Woodford County, and Mr. Hawkins and all of the staff that comes to all of our meetings. Thank you again. If we don't say it enough, I am very sincere in my thanks to all of you.
This evening, since our student board members here, you're going to give everybody a chance for any discussion and call upon her.
Yes, I am. Ms. McCown, you have anything you want to add? Do not feel compelled to, but you're always welcome to. So I don't feel like you have to.
Thank you. No, I definitely think we hit a lot of important points, especially concerning mental health among students. That's always a concern, especially going back to school, especially in this new way, going back virtually is going to be really hard for a lot of students. So I definitely think it's important that students are still provided with the same care and the same opportunities that they would get to improve their mental health as they would with in-person school. I think it's really important to check with your guidance counselors, and we've got a lot of great staff here as well. So if there could be ways to set up virtual meetings, virtual check-ins, or even in person at a time that wouldn't interfere with virtual class, I think that'd be great for a lot of different people, because it's not something you'd have to put on display. It can be a very personable thing. So
I agree, and I had heard from a few students, and then many emails have gotten. And what I've encouraged them too is hopefully the students will not forget about each other.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Like maybe not even your best friends, but you're aware, right? I'm sure of who may really need to be reached out to. And sometimes when a student does it, it's easier than So are you a senior? Is that correct?
Yes.
Congratulations. Fun looking at colleges online.
Oh,
Sure. All right. Do we have any reason for executive session?
Are you going to call another board member for discussion? Because if you're not, I'd like to add to the discussion.
Oh, go ahead.
I'd like to echo what Mr. Hawkins said about grace.
Mm-hmm.
Our teachers deserve grace. Our administrators deserve grace. They truly do. And I echo that. Somebody else that we have to think about beginning next Wednesday are parents and students.
Sure.
They deserve grace. Because a lot of parents aren't going to know what to do.
Yeah.
A lot of students aren't going to know what to do. And we have to show them grace. And I would also say that Ms. Egan deserves grace. She's chairman of the board. I can speak from experience. It is a difficult job. Not only in normal situations, but especially COVID situations. And I would echo that Ms. Springate, Ms. Bradley, Ms. Richardson, as they approach the difficult decisions about do we go to school virtually, do we go, they deserve grace too, because those situations, those decisions are crucial. So I would ask all of us at these tables to show that grace to everybody because
Yeah.
Lord knows they deserve it. Thank you.
And grace is the word of the day. I actually was interviewed by my
One other thing.
minister, and that was my, yeah.
I think that we ought to do, like our kindergarten students are asked to do, and clean our table before we leave.
Yeah. Okay, we'll do it. No executive session, anything else?
Move we adjourn.
Second?
I have a motion by Mr. Wilson and a second by Ms. Springate. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion passes.
Welcome, Mr. Fallon.
Thank
I
you.
look forward to working with you the next 4 months.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Let's go.
Bobby Jean.